Chapter 1460. Palace Master Lai Yun. Nye Tian recognized the identity of the black-robed figure, and a cold gleam flashed across his eyes. It was this person who had leaked the secret of Mo Rushi's sage body and made her the target of everyone. Now, he had openly disobeyed the holy judge's order and appeared at Mo Rushi's residence. He obviously had bad intentions. However, Palace Master Lai Yun was very quiet at this moment, as if he was waiting for something. Nye Tian concealed his aura and pretended to be unconcerned as he directly entered the small courtyard. Mo Rushi and Cher were discussing something happily, giggling from time to time. Clearly, they did not notice Palace Master Lai Yun's presence. Nye Tian did not dare to act rashly. The other party was a lord-level existence, and he was no match for him at this moment. Facing a powerhouse like Palace Master Lai Yun, Nye Tian once again felt powerless. Even though he was talented, he was still helpless in the face of absolute strength. If Palace Master Lai Yun attacked now, he would definitely not be able to resist. However, the strange thing was that Palace Master Lai Yun seemed to be afraid of something and had no intention of attacking. In fact, with his strength, controlling Nye Tian and the others was just a matter of an instant. Nye Tian was very puzzled as to why he did not attack. Nye Tian, you're here. Mo Rushi and Cher were overjoyed when they saw Nye Tian appear and shouted in unison. Nye Tian smiled faintly and remained calm. At this moment, Palace Master Lai Yun's figure suddenly moved, approaching Nye Tian and the others bit by bit. Nye Tian sensed through his divine sense that the other party was approaching. 100 meters, 50 meters, 30 meters, and was about to enter the small courtyard. Sweat the size of beans seeped out of his forehead. Boom! However, at this moment, the void suddenly shook slightly, and a tyrannical but imperceptible spiritual wave spread out and disappeared in a flash. Nye Tian felt this spiritual wave and could not help but narrow his eyes. His face was extremely shocked as he instantly understood that there was someone else lurking in the dark. The reason why Palace Master Lai Yun did not make a move was because he feared the existence of this person in the dark. This person did not seem to want to fight with Palace Master Lai Yun. That spiritual fluctuation just now was clearly a warning to Palace Master Lai Yun not to act rashly. Leave. Lai Yun noticed something and was clearly caught off guard. He frowned and roared in his heart before his figure flashed and instantly vanished. The spiritual wave also disappeared completely, and the surrounding void returned to normal as if nothing had happened. What a terrifying technique! Nye Tian sensed everything. He was shocked, but he didn't show it on his face. He didn't expect that there would actually be a person hiding in the dark. Furthermore, this person's concealment methods were extremely brilliant. If he hadn't taken the initiative to release a spiritual wave to warn Lai Yu, Nye Tian wouldn't have been able to detect this person's existence at all. Actually, if it wasn't for Nye Tian's strong spiritual power and the holographic divine rune, he wouldn't have been able to detect the existence of the person in the dark. This person is obviously protecting Ru Shi and Cher. Who could it be? Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he was bewildered. The first person he thought of was Qi Gui, the secret guard who was hiding beside Qi Yefeng. However, Qi Gui's aura didn't seem like this person. Moreover, he had no reason to protect Ru Shi and Cher. More importantly, Qi Gui's concealment methods might not be that powerful. His strength was definitely below Palace Master Lai Yun, and it was impossible for him to scare the latter away. Is it young Master Heartbroken? Nye Tian guessed in his heart, but felt that it wasn't very possible. Young Master Heartbroken was obviously not the kind of person who would hide in the dark. Nye Tian, can you come out to meet me? Just as Nye Tian was feeling puzzled, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind. It was actually a very familiar voice. It was the inescapable Net's inner sect elder, Dugu Lingtian. It's him. Nye Tian's pupils shrank slightly as he realized the identity of the person who had sent the message. He went blank for a moment before he seemed to understand something. After informing Emo Rushi and Shui of his plans, he left to track Dugulingtian's aura. A moment later, Nye Tian arrived at a hidden canyon in the Scarlet Crescent mountain range. In front of him stood a black-robed figure. It was Dugulingtian. Elder Dugu, it's been a while. Nye Tian let out a long breath and subconsciously maintained his vigilance. He sensed his surroundings to see if there was anyone else around. Nye Tian, you really didn't disappoint me. You've successfully merged with the boundary of the universe. Dugulingtian smiled. His hawk-like eyes glanced at Nye Tian. No one knew what he was thinking. Elder Dugu, you didn't appear at the Scarlet Crescent mountain range during the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. You couldn't be here to tell me this, right? Nye Tian laughed. His eyes were filled with determination. It was actually very dangerous for Dugulingtian to appear here. It would be terrible if he was discovered by others. Nye Tian, of course I have a reason for appearing here. Dugulingtian's eyes flickered. The nets and nets above and earth helped you merge the boundary of the universe. Now I want to make another deal with you. Speak, Nye Tian said coldly, not mincing words. Mother Earth Origin Stone. Dugulingtian's lips curled into a strange smile as he uttered these 4 words. Nye Tian was stunned and frowned. He didn't expect Dugulingtian to know about the Origin Stone as well. But then again, the nets and nets above and earth knew about the Origin Stone, so it wasn't strange for them to know about it. Dugulingtian let out a strange laugh and said, in this Divine Palace Grand Competition, the prize for the champion of the Low God Realm is a piece of Mother Earth Stone. Our nets above snares below is very interested in this Mother Earth Stone, and we hope to get it. You want to get the Origin Earth Stone from me? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, then he said, what if I don't agree? Although he didn't know why the nets and nets above and earth wanted the Origin Stone, Nye Tian didn't plan to continue the deal with them. For the safety of that girl with the body of a sage, you will definitely agree, Dugulingtian said calmly with a smile. Nye Tian's eyes flickered. He said coldly, the nets and nets above and earth are indeed powerful. They know everything. Previously, other than Nye Tian and the others, only the Holy Judgment and the 12 Shrine Masters knew that Emo Rushi had the body of a sage. But now, the nets and nets above and earth also knew. Could it be that there was someone from the nets and nets between the Holy Judgment and the 12 Shrine Masters? Thinking of this, Nye Tian's forehead was covered in sweat. The nets and nets above and earth was indeed a terrifying organization. Nye Tian, the body of a sage is something that everyone covets. Some people want to destroy it even if they can't get it for themselves. With your current strength, you can't protect that girl at all, Dugulingtian said calmly. Dugulingtian said indifferently, you only have one choice right now, and that is to agree to this deal. And then? Nye Tian frowned and asked coldly. Chapter 1461. In the valley, Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and looked at Dugulingtian. After a few seconds of silence, he said in a deep voice, that person hiding in the dark just now is from the inescapable net, right? Nye Tian guessed that the person who released the psychic fluctuation to scare away Palace Master Lai Yun was from the inescapable net. Dugulingtian was stunned for a moment. He obviously didn't expect that Nye Tian would actually notice the existence of that person, but he instantly regained his composure and smiled. That's the inescapable net secret guard. He just proved that he can protect that girl's safety. Really? Nye Tian chuckled and said, I think that person just now isn't protecting Rushi, but Cher, right? Dugulingtian was stunned again. He frowned and asked, what's the difference? At this moment, the way Dugulingtian looked at Nye Tian changed slightly. He didn't expect the young man in front of him to be so shrewd and have predicted everything. That inescapable net secret guard was indeed not protecting Emo Rushi but Cher. Nye Tian completely calmed down. His eyes were as calm as still water and said, I think that inescapable net secret guard has been following us for a long time. It seems that Cher is really important to you, otherwise you wouldn't have sent such a powerful martial artist to protect her in secret. Back when Ye Tian had been in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion, Gong Chen, the sect master of the Pill Pavilion, had told him that the Heavenspan Net wanted Shui to be their daughter, and that she would be as powerful as the Heavenspan Net's 2 paragon sections. Although Nye Tian rejected it at that time, he was still wondering who Cher was to make the inescapable net secret guard offer such tempting conditions. At this moment, he was even more certain that Cher was of extraordinary significance to the inescapable net secret guard. The inescapable net secret guard was only discovered today, but it was obvious that he had been secretly protecting Cher for a long time. We can't afford to lose Her Highness, so we have to ensure her safety, Dugu Lingtian said bluntly. Nye Tian was taken aback for a moment before saying, Elder Dugu, if I remember correctly, Cher isn't the eldest daughter of the inescapable net, is she? Dugu Lingtian smiled and did not answer. Instead, he said, Nye Tian, the dragnet will protect Her Highness no matter what. As for the other girl, unless you agree to the conditions of the Mother Earth Primordial Stone, the net will not protect her. The person who came today is just Palace Master Lai Yun. Next time, there might be even more powerful enemies. Are you going to keep worrying about that girl's safety? Nye Tian frowned as he considered something in his heart. Finally, he opened his mouth and said, I can give you the Origin Earth Stone, but I want to absorb the Origin Earth energy within it first. No problem, Dugu Lingtian replied with a faint smile on his face. What the inescapable net needed was the Mother Earth Primordial Stone, and not the Mother Earth Primordial energy within the stone. Alright, I'll do this deal. Nye Tian nodded his head and said, but I want the inescapable net to send another hidden net guard whose strength is not weaker than the previous one. He must stay by Mo Rushi's side at all times. If anything happens to Mo Rushi, our deal will be nullified immediately. All right, Dugu Lingtian nodded his head in agreement, appearing very magnanimous. His attitude and reaction, however, made Nye Tian even more doubtful. What exactly was the Mother Earth Primordial Stone? Why was the inescapable net so concerned about it? Nye Tian, our deal is decided. Goodbye. Dugu Lingtian did not stay any longer. After bidding farewell, he left immediately. Nye Tian looked in the direction where the other party disappeared, and his gaze became complicated. What kind of organization was the inescapable net? What connection did Cher have with this organization? Why did the inescapable net care so much about Cher? Many mysteries lingered in Nye Tian's heart, making him confused. Let's not think too much about it. Nye Tian could not help but purse his lips and murmur, this is also good. At least Rushi's safety can be guaranteed. As for Cher, I'm afraid the inescapable net is more worried about her safety than me. They will definitely not let anything happen to her. Nye Tian did not stay any longer and immediately left the valley. After returning to the small courtyard, Nye Tian activated the holographic divine rune, wanting to detect the existence of the hidden net guard. However, he could not find anything. The dragnet shadow guard was like a ghost, perfectly fusing with the void, completely undetectable. The next day, the grand tournament of the 12 Shrine began as scheduled. Nye Tian and the rest came to a huge valley in the Scarlet Crescent mountain range and stood on a high ground. Below them was a huge tournament stage that was 10,000 meters wide. This was the tournament stage for the Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists. The grand tournament would last for about half a month. The first 5 days were for the Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists. Ed, are you ready? Nye Tian looked at Ed beside him and asked with a smile. He told Ed to participate in the Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists tournament and warned the latter not to use the Divine Dragon Bloodline and Demon Dragon's Heart unless absolutely necessary. He told Ed that as long as the latter obtained the Heavenly Emperor Realm Chief, he would give the desolate ancestor's godhead to the latter. In fact, whether Ed obtained the heavenly emperor realm chief or not, Nye Tian would give him the godhead. Wang Haolin's desolate body would be handed over to Ed. Big brother Nye Tian, don't worry. Chapter 1462. The Heavenly Emperor competition was divided into 2 stages. The first stage was the wheel race. Every contestant would fight against the other 11 Divine Palace's martial artists. Every victory would be worth 1 point, and no points would be given for a draw or a loss. Finally, the top 24 would be decided. Ed would have 11 matches. Hopefully, he could win all 11. Big brother Nye Tian, I'm going. Ed smiled mischievously. He wasn't nervous at all. Instead, he was very excited. Be careful. Nye Tian nodded slightly, waiting to see Ed's spectacular performance. Ed stepped in the air and landed directly on the vast arena. Almost at the same time, a delicate-looking young man appeared and landed in front of him. It's Lai Fei from Cloud-Splitting Divine Palace. The moment the young man appeared, the whole arena was in an uproar. Countless people exclaimed in surprise. All eyes were on the delicate-looking young man. No one paid any attention to Ed. Lai Fei. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard the name. Then, the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. He had heard the people around him mention this name. It was the son of Lai Yu, the palace lord of Cloud-Splitting Divine Palace. Moreover, he was the most favored champion of the Heavenly Emperor competition. To most people, the title was already in Lai Fei's bag. Mr. Nye, your little brother's luck is too bad. He has to face Lai Fei in his first match. Zhao Zi, who was standing next to Nye Tian, sighed softly with a helpless face. Is he really that powerful? Nye Tian asked with a smile, not taking it seriously. Of course he is. Zhao Zi was slightly stunned. It's said that Lai Fei could condense his godhead several decades ago. However, he has been suppressing his strength for the Divine Palace Grand Competition. But even so, his current strength was stronger than that of an ordinary inferior deity martial artist. It's not an exaggeration to say that only a few warriors of the same level can withstand a casual move from him. Is that so? Nye Tian smiled again, but didn't deny it. Although he was tens of thousands of meters away from Lai Fei, Nye Tian could clearly sense his aura. One had to admit that Lai Fei was indeed very strong. His aura was even more valiant than an early-stage low-god realm expert. However, his opponent was Ed, a person who possessed the divine dragon's bloodline and the devil dragon's heart. Nye Tian guessed that Ed could easily defeat Lai Fei even if he didn't use these 2 trump cards. Lai Fei. Fly splitting. Run Fei. At this moment, the entire arena suddenly erupted into a tsunami of cheers. Everyone was actually shouting Lai Fei's name, as if everyone was looking forward to the scene of Lai Fei killing his opponent in a single move. In the pavilion high up in the sky, more than a dozen Divine Palace lords were laughing and chatting. Everyone had a smile on their face. Palace Master Lai Yun, with nephew Lai Fei's strength, the position of Heavenly Emperor's champion will definitely belong to him. The Palace Master of the Medicine King Palace, Yao Chen, chuckled and actually spoke in a flattering manner. Yeah, I heard that nephew Lai Fei's strength can't even compare to a lower god realm martial artist. How could these Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists be a match for him? Icy Cold Palace Master Ling Feng added. The other palace lords also chimed in. Clearly, they were all optimistic about Lai Fei. Qi Yifeng's expression turned ugly. He didn't know what to say. He didn't understand Edi's strength, but he also didn't think that a skinny youth could be a match for Lai Fei. Everyone, it's not good to make rash comments before the battle has even begun. At this moment, the heartbroken young master, who had been silent all this while, suddenly laughed and said with a profound expression. Edi's strongest point was his martial physique. It was very difficult to see through his strength at a glance. If it wasn't for the fact that Nye Tian had seen Ed fight before, he wouldn't have known how strong the latter was. The heartbroken young master had seen Ed transform into a dragon before, so he had some understanding of the latter's strength. He felt that Ed definitely had the strength to fight Lai Fei. The group of palace lords coughed dryly. They couldn't refute the heartbroken young master, but their eyes were clearly saying, "Just wait and see. That kid definitely won't be able to take a single move." At the same time, on the arena, Lai Fei looked at Ed coldly and said, "Stinking brat, you didn't go far at all. You met me in your first battle. Your journey as a heavenly emperor martial artist ends here." As his cold voice fell, Lai Fei's eyes surged with extremely cold, killing intent. He wanted to cause a sensation in the first battle, so he had to kill Ed in one move. It could only be said that Ed's luck was too bad. "We haven't started fighting yet. It's not certain who will win or lose." Ed chuckled. He didn't care about Lai Fei's threat at all. "You're courting death." Lai Fei's eyes turned cold. He didn't say anything else. His body trembled and his aura rose. A pair of black wings appeared on his back. When the wings were spread, they were hundreds of meters wide. A terrifying black vortex appeared above his head, surging strangely. What a terrifying aura! The crowd couldn't help but feel their hearts clench when they saw this scene. "Die!" In the next moment, Lai Fei roared. His wings flapped and he pounced forward. The black vortex above his head instantly shot out a black lightning bolt. It roared and roared. It was extremely terrifying. "It's over. That brat is dead for sure." The crowd's eyes trembled. They could almost see Ed being turned into ashes. Lai Fei's Xian lightning was extremely powerful. Even a lower god couldn't block it. However, Ed's expression was calm as usual. He took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. In everyone's eyes, his action was suicide. Using his body to take on the Xian lightning, wasn't that asking for death? However, what happened next shocked everyone. Kaboom! A loud explosion rang out. Under the shadow of Edie's fist, the black lightning was directly smashed into pieces. Then, the light from his fist shone brightly and shot out. Bang! Another muffled sound. Lai Fei's body suddenly froze in the air. Then, he flew backwards, leaving a trail of blood in the air. When he landed, he curled up on the ground. Hiss! The sudden scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air as they looked at the martial stage in disbelief. Countless mouths were agape, but they couldn't make a single sound. The one move that everyone expected to end the battle had happened. But the result was completely different from what they had expected. Lai Fei, the person who was originally the most favored to be the Heavenly Emperor, was actually defeated by Ed with one punch. Ed didn't seem to use any martial skills in this punch. He defeated Lai Fei with just his physical strength. The entire arena was dead silent. Even the drop of a needle could be heard. In the pavilion high up in the sky, the dozen palace lords all had ugly expressions. Especially Palace Lord Lai Yun. He felt as if there was a pile of donkey hair stuck in his chest, making him feel like he was suffocating. The strongest heavenly emperor of Lai Yun Divine Palace was defeated by Ed with one move. He couldn't accept this result. Qi Feng's eyes widened. He was ecstatic, but he didn't dare to show it. It was hard to suppress it. The people around Nye Tian were all abnormal. "Sigh. I think you're the unlucky one." Ed shook his head with a smile and turned to leave. Chapter 1463. Lai Fei had already been defeated. Ed had no intention of making another move and turned to leave. However, at this moment, Lai Fei suddenly moved and attacked Ed from behind. "Son of a bitch, I'll kill you!" Lai Fei roared angrily. Terrifying black profound lightning shrouded his entire body. A violent bolt of black lightning whizzed out and struck towards Ed. "Watch out!" The crowd suddenly froze and exclaimed in unison. No one expected that Lai Fei would not admit defeat after being defeated and actually attacked from behind. Lai Fei's face hidden in the profound lightning became hideous and terrifying. It was obvious that he had made up his mind to kill and wanted to kill in one strike. At this moment there was only one belief in his heart. He must obtain the title of Heavenly Emperor because only then would he have the capital to pursue Luo Xian. For the title of Heavenly Emperor's champion, he had suppressed his strength for dozens of years. He originally thought that no one was his opponent in this competition. He did not expect that he would encounter a freak like Ed in his first battle. Ed suddenly felt a shocking aura pressing down on him from behind. His heart shook and he wanted to block it, but it was already too late. Kaboom! In the next moment, an explosive sound resounded. Edie's figure flew out and smashed heavily onto the ground, leaving behind a bloody trail that was dozens of meters long. When the crowd saw this scene, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. The atmosphere once again fell into a deathly silence. Who would have thought that Lai Fei would be so shameless as to launch a sneak attack in front of everyone? Moreover, it was a sure kill move. On the spectator stand outside the valley, Wang Haolin could not help but exclaim when she saw Ed being beaten down. Her face was filled with terror. Despicable! Zhao Zi, who was at the side, roared in anger. Nie Tian also furrowed his brows and revealed killing intent in his eyes. If he was the one fighting this battle, Lai Fei definitely would not have any chance of surviving. Ed did not use his full strength just now. He just did not want to kill. Ed was only a teenager after all. He did not have much battle experience and did not know how sinister people could be. Nie Tian suppressed the anger in his heart and looked at Ed, who was lying in a pool of blood. He believed that a person with the bloodline of the divine dragon and the heart of the demon dragon would not fall just like that. One had to know that Ed had once blocked Zhao Qian's scarlet flame arrow with his bare hands. Although Lai Fei's fatal blow was fierce, it was still slightly inferior to Zhao Qian's arrow. Despicable! Lai Fei is too despicable! At this moment, the crowd reacted and many people began to roar in anger. However, Lai Fei's cold eyes scanned through the crowd, revealing extreme ferocity in his eyes. What he cared about was not what people thought of him. What he cared about was the leader of the Celestial Dharch, the capital to pursue Luo Xian. At this moment, in the pavilion high up in the sky, the 12 palace lords were stunned. They had not expected something like this to happen. He saw hope in Ed, but Lai Fei launched a sneak attack. If he did not say a few words, he would be suffocated to death. Crimson Moon Palace Master, the battle stage is originally a life and death gamble, with mutual deception and deceit. Lai Yu laughed and said coldly, being ruthless is also a part of strength. As long as you can win the battle, everything else is secondary. When the other palace lords heard Lai Fei's words, they were silent and did not speak. Only the heartbroken young master swept a glance at Lai Fei and said indifferently, Lai Fei, the battle is not over yet. Don't jump to conclusions. Lai Fei was slightly stunned and his gaze became much darker. If it was not for the heartbroken young master's identity, he absolutely would not tolerate the other party. Just as the heartbroken young master's voice fell, the figure lying in a pool of blood on the martial arena stood up. He stood up. When the crowd saw this scene, they were stunned at first and then exclaimed, who would have thought that Ed could still stand up after receiving a fatal blow from Lai Fei? Lai Fei's eyes narrowed slightly and he looked at Ed with a stern gaze. He squeezed out 2 words through his teeth, courting death. He believed that even if Ed did not die from that move, he would be seriously injured. Now that he stood up, he would not have the strength to fight anymore. You are so ruthless. Edie's face was badly mutilated and he could no longer be seen. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His body shook slightly and the blood stains on his body were washed clean. His cloudy eyes instantly became fierce. I do not want to kill anyone. You forced me to do this. Ed said coldly and raised his palm. Suddenly, A surging aura bloomed and waves of pure dragon energy filled the air. It was vast and majestic. This. Lai Fei was stunned. He actually felt that not only did Edi's aura not weaken, it had become much stronger. He originally thought that his strength was already the limit of a heavenly Emperor Realm warrior. He did not expect that there would be another heavenly Emperor Realm warrior whose aura was several times stronger than his. "I don't believe it. I'm going to kill you." However, in the next moment, Lai Fei suddenly roared fiercely, and the profound lightning around him became violent. He had his own obsession. He would not give up on being the leader of the heavenly Emperor Realm, even if he died. As his furious voice fell, the black wings on Lai Fei's back shook, and he charged over like a wild beast. Courting death. Edi's face was cold and stern as he muttered. He raised his arm and punched out without any fancy move. Roar! Instantly, dragon energy overflowed and a dragon's might spread. 1,000-meter-long dragon shadow appeared and an earth-shattering dragon roar resounded in the sky above the arena. The crowd was excited. They did not expect Edi's strength to be so abnormal. Rumble! In midair, the Xian lightning and the dragon shadow collided, but they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The dragon shadow suddenly released an unstoppable force, directly swallowing the Xian lightning. A terrifying aura exploded towards Lai Fei. No! High up in the sky, Palace Master Lai Yun suddenly felt that something was wrong. He screamed and dove down. However, it was too late. The tyrannical dragon shadow swept past and Lai Fei's body turned into a ball of blood light. Lai Fei, the strongest heavenly emperor of Lai Yun Divine Palace and the most popular candidate for the grand competition of the 12 shrines, could not withstand the power of Edi's punch and died on the spot. The tragic scene stunned everyone. They stared at the slender figure on the arena with their mouths agape. It was unimaginable that such a thin body contained such terrifying power. Lai Fei. At the same time, an extremely sorrowful howl resounded in the sky. As Palace Master Lai Yun's figure descended, a wild aura was released, and an incomparably huge pressure surged out. The arena with a circumference of 10,000 meters seemed to be unable to withstand this overbearing pressure, and instantly became shaky, as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. Chapter 1464. Boom! On the arena, along with Lai Yu taking a step forward, an enormous and boundless pressure was unleashed, and it spread towards the surroundings, causing the entire arena to be on the verge of collapse. Everyone outside the arena felt a powerful pressure, and they actually felt like they were suffocating. The cloud-splitting divine palace was the strongest of the 12 palaces. As the lord of the palace, Lai Yu was already at the peak of Overgod. It was obvious how terrifying his aura was when he unleashed it. Spurt! Ed felt the pressure and his body immediately trembled. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as paper, and his entire body twisted. Rip! Everyone gasped. No one had thought that Lai Yu would actually attack so openly. This was undoubtedly a direct violation of the rules of the competition. Ed. Nie Tian cried out when he saw that Ed could not hold on any longer. With a flash, he leapt into the air above the arena. However, just when he wanted to approach Ed, he felt an invisible force obstructing him, preventing him from approaching. Lai Yu was just too powerful. It was impossible for Nie Tian to even approach him. Little bastard, pay with your life for my son. Lai Yu's face was vicious as he roared out. He actually ignored his status and directly slammed his palm towards Ed. Even if Ed had the demon dragon's heart, there would definitely be nothing left of him once the palm landed. Lai Yu, stop! At the critical moment, a furious voice rang out. Then, a figure descended and forcefully broke through Lai Yu's aura. He directly landed beside Ed and threw a punch. Boom! The fist and palm collided in midair, causing the space to tremble. Waves of air spread out in all directions. The arena was struck by the huge force and collapsed loudly, turning into ruins in an instant. The figure forcefully received Lai Yu's palm, but he could not help but take a few steps back before stabilizing himself. His face was actually rather pale. Clearly, this person was not Lai Yu's opponent. Lord Divine Judgment! The palace lords in the sky all cried out when they saw the figure clearly. The person who saved ED at the critical moment was none other than the Divine Judgment, the heartbroken young master. Divine Judgment! Lai Yu was suddenly stunned when he saw the face of the person before him, and his gaze couldn't help but sink as he actually roared furiously with a deep voice. Move aside! A furious roar resounded, and the entire place fell into a deathly silence. Lai Yu actually dared to challenge the holy judgment in public. The other palace lords of the other divine palaces suddenly froze, and their figures landed together, as if they were all ready to take action. Impudent! The heartbroken young master raised his head and looked at Lai Yu with a gloomy gaze. He took out the Sacred Assembly's jade token and said in a cold voice, Lai Yu, if you dare to take another step forward, I will judge you as a holy adjudicator that you have provoked the Holy Assembly. Provoking the Holy Council. These few simple words caused Lai Yu to feel as if thousands of tons of iron sand had been poured into his feet, and he was unable to take another step forward. The Holy Parliament was the supreme organization of the 9 realms. Not to mention a mere cloud-splitting divine palace, even peak forces like the Wind Cloud Alliance or the inescapable Net wouldn't dare to provoke the Holy Parliament. Challenging the authority of the Holy Parliament would only result in one thing: death. Lai Yu, step back. The heartbroken young master spoke in a cold voice and growled in a low voice, don't test my patience anymore. Lai Yu's face was extremely gloomy, and he didn't dare to look at the heartbroken young master. His figure involuntarily started to retreat. Even if he felt the pain of losing his son, the remaining bit of rationality told him that he had to retreat. Seeing Lai Yu's figure retreating, the other palace lords finally heaved a sigh of relief. If Lai Yu really went crazy and accidentally killed the heartbroken young master, not only would the cloud-splitting divine palace be doomed, but the other divine palaces would also be doomed. The heartbroken young master was a holy adjudicator, and he came here on behalf of the Holy Parliament. If he died here, no matter the reason, the 12 divine palaces wouldn't be able to absolve themselves from the blame. Moreover, the heartbroken young master was a member of the Yu family. Yu Jiuxiao, you want to protect this person? Let me see how long you can protect him. Lai Yu's gloomy gaze swept across the heartbroken young master, and he said coldly in his heart. Yu Jiuxiao was the real name of the heartbroken young master. Phew! Nie Tian's figure stood tall in the sky, and he let out a long breath of turbid air. He was the one who asked ED to participate in the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces. If anything happened to the latter, he would definitely feel uneasy. Moreover, ED's identity wasn't simple. He was the next Devil Dragon King, and he shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving the Devil Dragon clan. One had to admit that the heartbroken young master had really saved Lai Yu's life. If Lai Yu killed ED, even if Nie Tian couldn't take revenge, Ming Hui wouldn't just sit back and watch. If he angered Ming Hui, how could the cloud-splitting divine palace continue to exist? Even if Ming Hui lost the boundary of the universe and his strength declined, he was still a supreme god, and he could destroy the entire cloud-splitting divine palace with a flick of his finger. Little brother, are you all right? Seeing that Lai Yu had retreated, the heartbroken young master turned to look at ED and asked softly, I'm fine. Thank you for saving me, Lord. ED bowed slightly and said respectfully. The heartbroken young master smiled faintly, and his gaze swept across ED's body. He thought to himself, this kid has the bloodline of the divine dragon, and he has the strongest bloodline density I've ever seen. However, there should be an even stronger force in his body, and I can't detect it. Strange. The heartbroken young master was puzzled, but he didn't say anything. His figure moved, and he took a step forward, standing high up in the sky. Lai Yu had violated the rules of the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces in public. Of course, he had to give everyone an explanation. After thinking for a moment, the heartbroken young master's gaze swept across the crowd, and he said in a clear voice, "Cloud-splitting divine palace Master Lai Yu has violated the rules of the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces in public, and attempted to kill a participant. His behavior is extremely vile. As a holy judgment, I have to punish Lai Yu severely." As he spoke, the heartbroken young master looked at Lai Yu, but the latter avoided his gaze. The heartbroken young master's gaze turned gloomy, and he said, "Considering that Lai Yu is in pain of losing his son, it's pardonable that he did this in a moment of desperation. He won't pursue this matter, but the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces shall end here. All participants of the cloud-splitting divine palace shall withdraw from the competition." Withdraw from the competition. As soon as the heartbroken young master's voice fell, the crowd went into an uproar. Countless people were stunned, as they didn't expect the heartbroken young master to give such a heavy punishment. Forcing the cloud-splitting divine palace to withdraw from the competition was undoubtedly a direct announcement that the cloud-splitting divine palace would be at the bottom of the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces. The cloud-splitting divine palace had always been the leader of the 12 divine palaces. Suddenly being at the bottom, it was unknown how many subsidiary planes and worlds would be lost. "You! Holy judgment, you!" When Lai Yu heard the heartbroken young master's words, he was so anxious that he almost called out the latter's name. His old face trembled, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. This punishment was too heavy for the cloud-splitting divine palace. The other 11 palace masters looked at each other in dismay, and there was a subtle joy in their eyes. The cloud-splitting divine palace's withdrawal from the competition was undoubtedly great news to the other divine palaces. "Lord Holy Judgment's punishment is unfair. I don't agree with it." At this time, a clear voice suddenly sounded, and then a purple-robed figure floated out. Her appearance was free and easy, and she was devastatingly beautiful. So beautiful! As the purple-robed figure appeared, everyone's eyes trembled. Many people couldn't help but exclaim, and their eyes were filled with infatuation. Chapter 1465. Luo Xian. Nie Tian's body shook when he clearly saw the peerlessly beautiful face in the sky. His eyes that were calm like water instantly surged with tempestuous waves, and the blood in his body surged in the opposite direction. He seemed to be on the verge of losing control. More than 100 years had passed, but the hatred in Nie Tian's heart hadn't diminished at all. At this moment, facing the person he once loved, he only wanted to ask, why? However, at this moment, Luo Xian acted as if she didn't see Nie Tian at all. Her ice-cold gaze didn't even glance in his direction. Nie Tian suppressed the anger in his heart and stood quietly in the sky, waiting to see what Luo Xian would say. Luo Xian's appearance caused a commotion. Countless eyes focused on her, but she ignored them all. Her beautiful eyes were as calm as water as they locked onto the heartbroken child. "Young lady, who are you?" The heartbroken child glanced at Luo Xian and asked coldly. His attitude didn't change because of her beauty. To the heartbroken child, Luo Xian was just an ordinary girl. There was nothing special about her. "I am Luo Xian, a disciple of the Shattering Cloud Divine Palace," Luo Xian said calmly. The heartbroken child was slightly stunned. To be able to stand out and speak in such a situation without the slightest nervousness, this girl must have a strong temperament. "You said that my punishment was unfair?" The heartbroken child turned to look at Luo Xian and asked in a deep voice. "Yes." Luo Xian nodded slightly and said, "The grand competition of the 12 shrines is a grand event for all the genius disciples of the 12 shrines. Many people deliberately suppressed their strength for the sake of this competition so that they could show their brilliance and become an influential figure in the realms. The palace master of the Shattering Cloud Divine Palace is wrong to violate the rules of the competition. However, Lord Holy Judgment, because of his mistake, he has implicated everyone in the Shattering Cloud Divine Palace. This is unfair to the participants of the Shattering Cloud Divine Palace. The effort they put in for this competition will be in vain. This will be a huge blow to their martial arts path in the future. It might even lead to inner demons. So, Lord Holy Judgment, please take back your decision and give another punishment. After saying that, Luo Xian looked at the heartbroken breaker prince with a burning gaze. She did not avoid his gaze at all. As soon as her words fell, it immediately set off an uproar in the crowd. Miss Xian is right. Everyone has put in so much effort for this competition. It would be a pity for the plane to withdraw from the competition. That's right. Lord Holy Judgment's punishment is indeed unfair to the people of Cloud Shattering Divine Palace. Since it was Palace Master Lai Yun who made a mistake, of course he should be the one to bear the punishment. Why did he implicate others? The crowd discussed loudly, and they were actually siding with Luo Xian. The heartbroken young master's face was as gloomy as still water. He had long heard of Luo Xian. This woman possessed the extremely rare Thousand Clouds dark body, and her martial arts talent was extremely high. However, he did not expect this woman to be so strong-willed, and her words were extremely sharp. The heartbroken young master thought to himself that his punishment was indeed a little harsh. Moreover, it was a little unfair to the people of the Cloud Shattering Divine Palace. After thinking for a moment, the heartbroken young master looked at Luo Xian and said indifferently, "Judging from what you're saying, you want Palace Master Lai Yun to shoulder all the blame, right?" There was a deeper meaning behind his words. He had heard that Palace Master Lai Yun was Luo Xian's teacher. He wanted to see how Luo Xian would respond next. Yes. Unexpectedly, Luo Xian nodded calmly and said directly, "Palace Master Lai Yun made a mistake, so of course he should shoulder all the blame. Moreover, as a palace master, he should take the initiative to shoulder all the blame and not implicate the others of the divine palace. I think this is what a palace master should really do." There was no hesitation in her cold voice, as if she was talking about someone who had nothing to do with her. As soon as Luo Xian finished speaking, everyone was stunned, as if they had heard wrongly. Luo Xian actually blamed her teacher in front of everyone, and even asked him to take the initiative to shoulder all the blame. The heartbroken young master was stunned for a moment, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect Luo Xian to answer in such a straightforward manner. This woman is so cruel. In order to participate in the competition, she would even betray her teacher. Amazing! The heartbroken young master thought to himself. Then, he looked at Palace Master Lai Yun, smiled playfully, and said, "Lai Yu, you're not simple. You've taught a good disciple who puts righteousness before family." For the future of the cloud-splitting divine palace, she publicly asked her teacher to stand up and bear all the blame. This method is really amazing. Lai Yu was stunned on the spot, and his eyes were a little dazed. He looked at Luo Xian in surprise, as if he was wondering if this was the Luo Xian who was usually so respectful to him. In Lai Yu's eyes, Luo Xian at this moment had become a completely different person. She was like a completely different person compared to her previous respectful self. Lai Yu's body trembled slightly, and he was completely speechless. Luo Xian's slap in front of everyone was so loud and clear that he could not even raise his head. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian from afar, and he sneered in his heart, "Luo Xian, for a mere grand competition of the 12 shrines, she even betrayed her teacher. How ruthless!" Palace Master Lai Yun, it seems that Miss Luo Xian's words are what everyone wants. It's not good for this holy adjudicator to go against everyone's wishes. At this time, the heartbroken young master's voice sounded, and he said in a deep voice, "Lai Yu, you violated the rules of the grand competition of the 12 shrines, and your sin is unforgivable. As a holy adjudicator, I sentence you to be the guardian of this grand competition. Together with the secret guards of the 12 shrines, you will ensure that the grand competition proceeds smoothly. As for the cloud-splitting divine palace, the Heavenly Emperor Realm martial artists don't need to participate in the grand competition, and the lower God Realm martial artists can continue. That's all. After saying that, the heartbroken young master did not wait for Lai Yu's response. His figure moved, and he directly stepped into the pavilion high up in the sky. Lai Yu was stunned on the spot, and he was in a daze for a long time. The other 11 palace masters looked at the dazed Lai Yu, and they all had a playful smile on their faces. Being betrayed by his own disciple in front of everyone, Palace Master Lai Yun was really embarrassed this time. After half a day, Lai Yu finally reacted. He glared fiercely at Luo Xian, and his figure moved and disappeared into the void. The dignified cloud-splitting divine palace master had to stay with those secret guards. This kind of feeling was definitely not good. No matter what, Lai Yu could be considered to have made a big fool of himself this time. But Luo Xian did not even look at Lai Yu from the start to the end, as if the latter was just a stranger. She was able to have today's achievements completely because of Lai Yu's nurturing. Lai Yu was very harsh to the other disciples, but he treated Luo Xian like his daughter. But even so, Luo Xian still stabbed Lai Yu's heart with the most painful knife at the most crucial time. At this time, Luo Xian's eyes suddenly looked at Ed below, and she said cold, "You killed Lai Fei. I will definitely not let you off." Her voice was calm, but when it landed in everyone's ears, it seemed even more sinister and cold. After Luo Xian finished speaking, she prepared to leap up and leave. But right at this time, a low and deep voice sounded. Chapter 1466. Nie Tian came in front of Luo Xian and looked at the woman whose appearance had not changed much. However, his eyes were no longer filled with love, but deep hatred. It was this woman who killed him with her own hands. Nie Tian. Luo Xian looked at Nie Tian, but her reaction was surprisingly calm, as if the latter was someone who had nothing to do with her. However, the fact was that the man in front of her was her husband who had died in her hands. Killing her husband was not something an ordinary woman could do. The confrontation between Nie Tian and Luo Xian in the sky caused a commotion among the crowd. "It's that silver-haired boy. Is there any grudge between him and Miss Xian? This boy is very strong. He once defeated Jian Chun of the Heaven Sword God Palace. He can't be interested in Miss Xian, right? With his strength, I'm afraid he's still a bit lacking." The crowd's eyes were focused on the two people in the sky. Their eyes were bright, as if they were expecting something. On the other side, Mo Rushi and Cher's beautiful eyes flickered when they saw this scene. Mo Rushi knew Nie Tian's past life very well, so of course she knew who Luo Xian was. Is it this girl? She betrayed Nie Tian and even killed Nie Tian? Mo Rushi looked at Luo Xian, her eyes flashing and trembling. There was an indescribable sadness in her heart. Cher did not know about Nie Tian's past life, but she could feel Nie Tian's hatred for Luo Xian. She could not help but whisper, "Is that girl Nie Tian's great enemy?" At this moment, high up in the sky. "Nie Tian, what do you want me to say to you? An apology?" Suddenly, Luo Xian laughed and said, "Don't be childish. It's just a business deal between us. Didn't you get together with me because of my identity and beauty?" Her calm voice was full of ridicule. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian and couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Eyebrows furrowed, Luo Xian continued, "Nie Tian, if you had been in my shoes back then, you would have given up on me as well if you had been offered a chance to enter the realms. People are just using each other. When a person has no value to you, of course you don't need to cherish him anymore." Ha! Ha! Suddenly, Nie Tian laughed and looked at Luo Xian as if he was looking at a stranger. "What are you laughing at?" Luo Xian furrowed her brows in confusion. "I laughed at myself for being so ridiculous." Nie Tian's expression sank and became indifferent. Luo Xian, I regarded you as my true love, but I didn't expect you to see me like this. For your own future, you gave up the person you love. I, Nie Tian, cannot do such a thing. I've been with you for so long, but you never understood me. At this point, Nie Tian's expression suddenly became calm and his eyes were filled with endless desolation. It was only now that Nie Tian understood that Luo Xian's heart was so cold. In her eyes, people were only using each other. Just like Lai Yu, when he had no value, he could be abandoned at any time. Luo Xian was really a cold woman. Nie Tian looked at the woman in front of him and felt his heart tremble. It was unimaginable that a person's heart could be so cold. Nie Tian, the reason why I killed you back then was so that I could enter the realms myself. Luo Xian looked at Nie Tian, her ice-cold eyes slightly trembling as she said, As for you killing my father, I won't blame you either. From now on, we are strangers. I hope you don't block my path, or I will kill you all the same. Your path? Nie Tian also calmed down. Seeing Luo Xian's coldness, he felt much more at ease. He smiled and said, Are you referring to the Lesser God Chief? Yes. Luo Xian nodded and said, I am determined to get the Lesser God Chief. I will kill anyone who dares to block my way. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian and couldn't help but frown. He suddenly thought of something and a name appeared in his mind, Origin Earth Origin Stone. Luo Xian had publicly fallen out with Lai Yu just now to continue participating in the Divine Palace competition. Her direct goal was the Lesser God Chief, but her hidden goal was the Origin Earth Origin Stone. All of a sudden, Nie Tian seemed to have thought of something. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he sent a voice transmission to Luo Xian. Luo Xian, no wonder you dared to fall out with Palace Master Yun Lai. It's the Origin Earth Origin Stone, right? Origin Earth Origin Stone. In an instant, Nie Tian figured everything out. When Dugu Lingtian came to find him, he was very confident, as if Nie Tian would definitely get the Lesser God Chief. Now that he thought about it, Dugu Lingtian wasn't confident in Nie Tian, but in the inescapable net. The Origin Earth Origin Stone must be very important to the inescapable net, so Nie Tian was definitely not the only one who made a deal with the inescapable net. Nie Tian had some dealings with the inescapable net and already knew that it was an organization that did everything flawlessly. Since they wanted the Origin Earth Origin Stone, they naturally had to be sure that they could get it. Hence, the inescapable net made deals with many people. Not only Nie Tian, but also Luo Xian, even Jianqiu, and even other people who might get the Lesser God Chief. Nie Tian guessed that the inescapable net must have given Luo Xian very good conditions, and it was even possible that she joined the inescapable net. Otherwise, Luo Xian wouldn't have the guts to fall out with Palace Master Lai Yun. Luo Xian was indeed shrewd. It seemed like she had already thought of a way out. How do you know? Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered. She immediately reacted and transmitted her voice. It seems like the inescapable net also made a deal with you. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said, I'm sorry, I also care about the Lesser God Chief. So you're saying that you're going to block my way? Luo Xian's beautiful eyes darkened and a cold glint flashed in them. She said coldly, You want to block my way? Let's see if you have the ability to do so. We'll wait and see. Nie Tian smiled indifferently. He had already treated Luo Xian as a complete stranger. If the latter wanted to fight to the death, he would accompany her to the end. We'll wait and see. Luo Xian's gentle lips curled into a cold smile. She took one last look at Nie Tian, then turned and left. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian's back and smiled faintly. Then, he also turned and left. When the crowd saw the two suddenly leave, they couldn't help but be disappointed. It seemed like what they were waiting for did not happen. On the other side, a handsome young man with a long sword on his back sneered and said in his heart, Luo Xian, Nie Tian, do you really think you can get the Lesser God Chief? What a joke! The title of Lesser God Chief is mine. This young man was none other than the #1 genius of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, Jianqiu. The inescapable net had also made a deal with Jianqiu. The Mother Earth Yuan stone seemed to be extremely important to the inescapable net. They had to get it. Chapter 1467. 5 days later, the Heavenly Emperor Realm Martial Artists competition ended. Ed was invincible all the way. All the opponents he met either surrendered or were defeated in one move. He became the biggest dark horse in the Heavenly Emperor Realm Martial Artists competition and easily won first place. Nie Tian was sincerely happy for Ed. He gave him the divine spark that imprisoned the desolate ancestor and taught him how to control the divine spark's power. The desolate ancestor was related to Wang Haolin's life, so Ed carefully kept it and was very grateful to Nie Tian. How could Nie Tian not see that this kid was interested in Wang Haolin? He gave him the divine spark to create conditions for him. Next, the highly anticipated Low God Martial Artists competition began. Nie Tian took a look at his challenge card and murmured, "What a coincidence, it's also #1. This time, there were 10 participants from Red Moon Divine Palace. In addition to Nie Tian, there were also Shui Wushuang, Thousand Flowing Kill and others. However, Nie Tian estimated that only he and Shui Wushuang had the strength to enter the top 12. If Thousand Flowing Kill was lucky, he might have a chance. First Battle of Low God Martial Artists, #1 vs #73. At this time, the green-robed old man above the arena announced the start of the first battle. Nie Tian was the first to enter the arena. Nie Tian, be careful. Emorushi was very worried about Nie Tian and said softly, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then his figure moved and landed on the vast arena. The arena for Low God Martial Artists was wider than the arena for Heavenly Emperor Realm Martial Artists. It was tens of thousands of meters wide, and the entire arena was reinforced by a divine array, enough to withstand the attacks of High God Martial Artists. Nie Tian's figure landed, and almost at the same time, a handsome martial artist appeared in front of him. "I am Pang Shui from Green Sun Divine Palace, please." Pang Shui cupped his hands slightly, appearing very polite. Nie Tian nodded slightly and also cupped his hands. Red Moon Divine Palace Nie Tian. The first battle attracted everyone's attention. In the pavilion high up in the sky, the group of palace masters also looked at the two people below with great interest. Pang Shui has the strength of a late-stage low god, and is also a genius warrior of Qingyang Palace. Nie Tian only has the strength of a mid-stage low god, but he once defeated Jian Chun. I wonder who will win this battle? The Medicine King's Divine Palace Master, Yao Qin, smiled faintly and looked at the Crimson Moon Palace Master and the Azure Sun Palace Master meaningfully. Everyone in the 12 Divine Palaces knew that the Red Moon Divine Palace and the Azure Sun Divine Palace had a relatively good relationship. In the first battle, these two warriors from the Divine Palace would meet together, which was also interesting. That's hard to say. The Azure Sun Palace Lord smiled and said, "I didn't see the scene of Nie Tian defeating Jian Chun. Who knows if the rumors are exaggerated?" Qi Yifeng raised his brows and said with a smile, "Azure Sun Palace Lord, don't be anxious. After this battle, you will know whether or not it's too dazzling." After saying that, the two palace masters looked at each other with a hint of provocation. At this time, on the martial arts arena, Nie Tian looked up at Pang Shui and couldn't help but narrow his eyes. It seemed that this face was a little familiar. Kill! However, at this moment, Pang Shui's figure moved and directly attacked. A black spear appeared in his hand and he thrust it out, causing the space to tremble. A huge spear shadow roared and pressed down violently. Nie Tian frowned and leaped into the air, easily avoiding the spear shadow's frontal attack. At the same time, the long sword in his hand slashed down. The mighty sword shadow suddenly fell, like a mountain collapsing, smashing towards Pang Shui. Pang Shui was slightly stunned and realized that something was wrong. He wanted to react, but it was already too late. Bang! The sword's shadow fell and a muffled sound was heard. Pang Shuai's figure directly flew out and was dragged on the ground for dozens of meters, leaving a bloody trail. Hiss! The crowd couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this scene. They didn't expect this battle to be so straightforward. Most people thought that Nie Tian would win, but they didn't expect him to win so easily. In a single move, he defeated Pang Shuai. Pang Shuai's figure stood up on the martial arts arena. His body was dripping with blood, but he was obviously not seriously injured. He smiled awkwardly and cupped his hands, saying, "Thank you, Brother Nie, for showing mercy." Pang Shuai wasn't stupid. Of course, he knew that Nie Tian didn't use his full strength in this sword strike. Otherwise, he would definitely end up without a corpse. He was a little surprised that Nie Tian didn't kill him. One had to know that the 12 sacred palaces were very serious in scheming against each other. Those powerful cultivators would kill other cultivators as long as they had the slightest chance. Even if a cultivator's godhead wasn't destroyed, not everyone had the opportunity to reconstruct their physical body. Not to mention that it took a long time to reconstruct a physical body. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. Only now did he remember that Pang Shuai looked very similar to the Azure Sun's sacred palace's Pang San when he first came to the domain. However, Pang San's physique was on the same level as Jean de Bao's. Pang Shuai only looked similar to him, but their physiques were very different. The first match ended in a straightforward manner. Nie Tian easily obtained a point, allowing him to take a step towards the top 12. Next, the competition continued. The next few matches were very ordinary, with nothing noteworthy. The few people that Nie Tian was concerned about did not appear. In this Sacred Palace Grand Competition, the person that Nie Tian paid the most attention to was undoubtedly Luo Zian, followed by Jian Qiushue, Wu Shuang, and the others. Moreover, he also thought of one person, but this person had not appeared yet, and that was Duguanai. Nie Tian guessed that Duguanai must have joined the 12 sacred palaces. With his talent and strength, he should have participated in the grand competition. It was just that he had not appeared yet. At this moment, the green-robed old man loudly announced the start of the next match, the 7th match of the Low God Realm Martial Artists, number 17 versus number 23. As the sound of his voice faded, a peerless silhouette descended onto the stage. Luo Zian. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the figure. It seemed that everyone was boiling with excitement. One had to admit that Luo Zian was indeed very popular. Miss Zian, Sky Sword Divine Palace's Jian Xia would like to learn from you. The next moment, a rather playful voice sounded. Then, a figure in gray landed, and his fox-like eyes unscrupulously sized up Luo Zian. Jian Xia, the sword Dao genius of Sky Sword Divine Palace, the second of the 4 Jian brothers. His strength was weaker than Jian Qiushue, but not much different from Jian Chun. It's Luo Zian and the people of Sky Sword Divine Palace. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly. It was obvious that he was interested. Jian Xia's strength was similar to Jian Chun's, and Nie Tian had fought with Jian Chun before. At this moment, it was a good opportunity to see Luo Zian's strength through Jian Xia. Lady Zian, I am a man who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. I won't do anything to you. Jian Xia chuckled, and his eyes flashed with lascivious light. He had only heard that Luo Zian was very strong, but he had never seen her in person, so he didn't really believe it. He felt that Luo Zian's strength must have been exaggerated because she was too beautiful. Luo Zian's beautiful eyes flickered slightly. She glanced at Jian Xia, and the corners of her mouth curled up into a murderous smile. Then, she raised her palm and suddenly, a black light gushed out. It was like an arrow released from a bow, and it attacked Jian Xia. You want to kill me with this level of attack? Jian Xia felt that the black light was not strong, and he chuckled. But before he could react, he was enveloped by the black light. Chapter 1468. On the arena, the strange scene made everyone's eyes tremble. They were stunned on the spot. They had no idea what was going on. They only saw Luo Xian raise her hand and shoot out a black light. Then, Jian Xia died on the spot without being able to fight back. Jian Xia was a genius swordsman of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace. His strength was the same as Jian Chun, a peak lower deity. As for Luo Xian, she was also a peak lower deity. But the strength she displayed was completely overwhelming. Jian Xia died before he could react. It was hard to believe that the two combatants were of the same strength. After a long time, the crowd gasped. They were still shocked. In the pavilion high up in the sky, the Heaven Sword Palace Master, Jian Wuya, had a gloomy face because Jian Xia was his son. But with Palace Master Lai Yun as an example, Jian Wuya didn't dare to make a move in public. Otherwise, he would end up worse than Lai Yu. Seeing his son die tragically, Jian Wuya's grief was imaginable. He said coldly, "What a vicious woman! She killed people like they were grass. No wonder she dared to betray my teacher." The other palace masters looked gloomy but didn't say anything. In fact, everyone knew that although the grand competition of the 12 shrines was only a competition between martial artists, everyone basically stepped onto the arena with the intention to kill. The 12 shrines fought openly and secretly. Killing the genius martial artists of the other shrines would weaken the strength of the other shrines. What a strange method! The heartbroken prince frowned. Even he didn't see how Luo Xian killed Jian Xia. The Thousand Clouds' dark body, one of the 4 ancient taboo bodies, was indeed terrifying. High up in the stands, Nie Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly. He had a puzzled look on his face. He had to admit that Luo Xian's strength was beyond his expectations. Jian Xia and Jian Chun's battle strength was about the same. Although Nie Tian also defeated Jian Chun, it was almost an all-out battle. On the other hand, Luo Xian had effortlessly killed Jian Xia. This was completely different. Thousand Clouds' dark body, what kind of terrifying martial body is it? Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He used his divine sense to scan Jian Xia, but his face changed again. Huang Xiaolong suddenly discovered that Jian Xia's godhead had lost its divine sense, becoming a masterless godhead. Luo Xian's one move not only destroyed Jian Xia's godhead, but even his divine sense was erased. Jian Xia was completely killed by Luo Xian in one move. Luo Xian, it seems I have indeed underestimated you. Nie Tian thought to himself. Luo Xian was indeed a very difficult opponent to deal with. In fact, many of the martial artists who participated in the grand competition of the 12 shrines appeared to be at the pinnacle of the lower deity stage on the surface, but in fact, they were stronger than ordinary middle deities. In order to participate in the grand tournament, many people could even suppress their strength for more than 100 years. Over the past 100 years, his strength had not increased, but his strength had been slowly accumulating, and his battle prowess was equally terrifying. At this moment, Luo Xian, who was on the arena, suddenly raised her head. Her eyes swept past everyone, and finally locked onto Nie Tian. She said in a stern voice, "This is the consequence of blocking my path." An icy cold and overbearing voice resounded in the sky above the arena, and it was very difficult for others to believe that this was a woman. Luo Xian was even more domineering than the average male cultivator. She had defeated Jian Xia in the first match in a domineering manner, clearly to intimidate everyone, telling them not to block her path. However, it seemed that the most important thing to do was to send a message to Nie Tian and make him back off. However, Nie Tian was not the kind of person who would give way easily. He was not afraid of a challenge. He was only afraid that the challenge was not big enough. "Luo Xian, you're too arrogant." Just as Luo Xian's voice fell, another voice sounded. In the next moment, a terrifying intense soared into the sky, as if it wanted to tear heaven and earth apart. The crowd felt a powerful pressure pressing down on them, causing their hearts to quiver. Following the source of the voice, they saw the other genius swordsman of Sky Sword Divine Palace, Jian Qiu. Jian Qiu released his sword intent in front of the crowd, clearly wanting to prove to everyone that his strength was no weaker than Luo Xian's. Sensing Jian Qiu's sword intent, Nie Tian's brows wrinkled slightly. He was shocked, inwardly exclaiming, "Swords bone, swordsman." God realm swordsmanship had 6 major realms: sword mark, sword vein, sword bone, sword essence, sword forgetting self, and sword and martial unity. Each realm was a qualitative leap for a swordsman. Cher only had early-stage low-god strength. The reason she could defeat a mid-god expert in a single move was because of her extremely high realm of swordsmanship. Jian Qiu was a peak low-god. Just like Cher, he possessed the sword-bone realm. Conservatively speaking, Jian Qiu's battle prowess should be at the peak of mid-god realm, or even higher. Cher's battle prowess should not be weaker than Jian Qiu's. After all, she had the bloodline of Wan Jian, the vein of 3 lives. Her godhead was far stronger than the average cultivator's. Jian Qiu's strength is also above my expectations, Nie Tian said inwardly with a slight frown. It seemed that the competition for the title of Low God Champion would be exceptionally fierce. At present, both Luo Xian and Jian Qiu were very strong contenders. Who knew if other terrifying opponents would appear next? Sword Bone Realm, is it? Luo Xian's figure soared into the sky with a stomp of her foot. She concealed her aura and looked at Jian Qiu coldly. She said indifferently, "You do have some strength, but you are only barely qualified to make me draw my sword. I even doubt if you can withstand a single strike from me." Her calm voice was domineering and sharp. At this moment, Luo Xian was overlooking the crowd. It was as though everyone present was trash in her eyes. Hearing Luo Xian's words, everyone's faces shuddered. Their eyes revealed deep fear. She actually said that Jian Qiu couldn't withstand a single strike from her. The crowd did not know if Luo Xian was exaggerating, but since she dared to say so, it meant that she had absolute confidence in defeating Jian Qiu. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian. His eyes narrowed slightly. He knew Luo Xian very well. She was not the kind of person who would casually boast. This woman was very talented and shrewd. She was very frightening. Nie Tian had almost forgotten that Luo Xian was also a swordsman. However, when she had killed Jian Xia in an instant, she had not used a sword at all. Hence, Nie Tian could not even tell what realm Luo Xian's swordsmanship had reached. Nie Tian guessed that Luo Xian was very likely to be the same as Jian Qiu. She was also at the sword-bone realm. Luo Xian, you. Jian Qiu was rendered speechless by Luo Xian's words. His face flushed red. He was the #1 swordsmanship genius of Heaven's Sword Divine Palace. He had actually been humiliated by a martial artist of the same generation to the point that he couldn't withstand a single strike. How could he not be angry? However, he was still rational and did not attack. He only said coldly, "Luo Xian, you killed my second brother. I will kill you with my own hands to avenge him. If you want revenge, feel free to come at me." Luo Xian smiled coldly. Then, she ignored Jian Qiu and immediately left. On the other side, a black-robed man who was as thin as a stick smiled faintly. He muttered, "A sword-bone swordsman and a Luo Xian who does not care about sword-bone swordsmen. This match is going to be interesting." Chapter 1469. Duguanai had indeed joined the 12 shrine palaces and represented the Arctic Shrine in the grand competition of the 12 shrines. At this moment, Duguani's eyes flickered like an eagle's. No one knew what he was thinking. The commotion caused by Luo Xian and Jian Qiu soon calmed down and the competition continued. In the following matches, no one appeared that caught Nie Tian's attention. His second opponent was a late-stage low god from the Divine Glacial Palace. He was defeated by Han Li with a single move. Nie Tian listened to Cher's words and did not kill that cultivator. Even though he knew that the Arctic Shrine was an old enemy of the Red Moon Shrine, he did not kill that cultivator. Nie Tian's figure returned to the spectator's stand with a relaxed expression. By this time, basically everyone who should have come out had come out. He did not find anyone particularly strong, so entering the top 12 was not a problem at all. The low god competition would last for 10 days. Nie Tian thought that he had to increase his strength again within these 10 days. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for him to fight against experts like Luo Xian and Jian Qiu. Next, the green-robed elder announced the start of the next match. 2 figures appeared on the arena. They were actually 2 swordsmen. Nie Tian frowned when he saw the 2. The corners of his mouth rose coldly as he muttered, "Duguanai, you finally appeared." The skinny figure on the arena was very familiar to Nie Tian. It was Jian Xie Duguanai. He was originally worried that Duguanai would not appear. He did not expect that the latter would appear. Nie Tian had not forgotten about the Heaven Desolate Palace. He had promised Songshan Shui that he would definitely avenge Elder Heaven Desolate. Duguanai had killed his master. He was even more ruthless than Luo Xian. How could Nie Tian let him live? "Duguanai, you better pray that you don't meet me too soon." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said with a cold heart. At this time, the person who was facing off against Duguanai on the martial arts arena, Nie Tian was also very familiar with him. It was the swordsman he had met in the Medicine King Pill Pavilion, Xing Kai Qiao. Nie Tian remembered that Xing Kai Qiao had the power of a peak lower deity, and was a swordsman at the sword pattern realm. Duguanai hadn't been in the realms for very long. Even if he had been cultivating all this time, he wouldn't be very strong. However, Nie Tian felt that it would not be easy for Xing Kai Qiao to defeat Duguanai, because Duguanai not only had the abnormally strange 100 virtual body, but he also had the 8th other pupil, the Devil's Night pupil. Sword range swordsman, not bad. I'll use you as an example. On the martial arena, Duguanai smiled coldly with an extremely gloomy expression, and he actually didn't take Xing Kai Qiao seriously at all. When Xing Kai Qiao fought against Nie Tian, he was already a sword range swordsman. After not seeing him for several months, he had already broken through to the sword range realm. He knew that he couldn't compare to experts like Luo Xian and Autumn Sword, but he was still very confident that he could fight his way into the top 12. "You're just a sword range swordsman with the strength of a mid-stage lower deity. Where did your arrogance come from?" Xing Kai Qiao smiled coldly and pointed out Duguanai's strength. At the same time, his figure moved, and he slashed with his long sword. Surging sword silhouettes came roaring like raging waves, pressing down on Duguanai. The crowd's heart shuddered. Their gazes instantly became fanatical, as though they could already see the scene of Duguanai being killed in a single strike. However, Duguanai stood in midair. His eyes flickered for a moment before turning black, as though they were a bottomless abyss. Boom! In the next moment, Duguanai's eyes trembled. He suddenly released a black vortex. At first, it was only the size of a fist, but in an instant it expanded thousands of times, turning into an enormous black hole. It was as though a giant beast from the abyss had opened its mouth of darkness. This is... Xing Kai Qiao cried out in surprise when he saw this scene. He felt as though he had lost control of himself in an instant. An enormous force was pulling him toward the black hole. In the next moment, the sword silhouettes released by Xing Kai Qiao were directly swallowed by the black vortex, disappearing into nothingness in an instant. That black vortex expanded once again, releasing an incomparably violent energy, as though it was going to devour everything. When the crowd saw this scene, they were so shocked that they couldn't utter a word. No one would have thought that the ordinary-looking Duguanai would actually be able to release such a strange power. At this moment, Xing Kai Qiao let out a blood-curdling scream. He completely lost control of his body and was directly swallowed by the black vortex. His entire person disappeared. Boom! In the next moment, the black vortex suddenly collapsed, turning into a ray of black light and rushing back into Duguni's eye. The arena returned to silence, as though nothing had happened. However, Zheng Kaiqiao's figure had disappeared, and even his godhead had disappeared. This extremely bizarre scene caused everyone to gasp. At this moment, the shock in their hearts was even more intense than when Luo Xian had killed Jian Xia in an instant. Luo Xian's strength was tyrannical, and at the same time, she was also very famous. However, Dugunai was a completely unknown nobody, yet he was still so terrifying. This was a bit hard to accept. In particular, Duguni's skinny figure and unattractive appearance were even more repulsive. Nie Tian looked at Dugunai and was also stunned for a long time before he reacted. Previously in the Heaven Realm, Dugunai was defeated by Sher with a single sword strike, and even the Devil's Knight's pupil was destroyed. But now, it seemed that Duguni's Devil's Knight's pupil had regenerated, and it seemed to be even more terrifying than before. It actually directly swallowed Zheng Kaiqiao. With the Devil's Knight's pupil and the 100 virtual body, Dugunai is also a difficult opponent. Nie Tian slightly frowned and said in his heart. Duguni's strength was the same as his, and so was his level of swordsmanship. Moreover, he also had a terrifying trump card. He was an opponent. The 100 virtual body could weaken the opponent. This was very powerful. Just now, Nie Tian felt that Zheng Kaiqiao's strength had been directly weakened from the peak of the low god stage to the early low god stage. Even Nie Tian's supreme dragon vein could not resist the weakening power of the 100 virtual body. Among all the Yuan veins, Nie Tian had only seen Sher's 3 lives vein ignore the 100 virtual body. But Nie Tian had the 10th Yuan vein raw star stone, so he was not afraid of the 100 virtual body. Therefore, he had a very high chance of winning against Dugunai. Good! It was at this moment, in the pavilion high up in the sky, a sudden laughter sounded. The lord of the glacial palace, Lung Feng, couldn't help but laugh and said, Dugunai killed his opponent in one move. This has boosted the morale of my glacial palace. Very good. Ling Feng didn't expect that Duguni's strength would be so strong. It was far beyond his expectation. Originally, he thought that this time, the glacial palace would once again be ranked at the bottom. But after seeing Duguni's strength, he felt that Dugunai had the strength to compete for the first place of the low god stage. The lord of the palace of Medicine King, Yao Qin, wore a gloomy face. He was extremely embarrassed because Zheng Kaiqiao, who was killed by Dugunai, was a member of the Palace of Medicine King. I really didn't expect that there would be a martial artist who possesses the pupil of the Devil's Knight in this god-shocking competition. What a surprise! The heartbroken young master's reaction was very calm. He smiled faintly and thought to himself, this man's potential is endless. However, he is too ruthless and bloodthirsty. I'm afraid he will become an extremely dangerous character in the future. The heartbroken young master was a little worried. It would be terrible if a person like Dugunai was recruited by an Lin. Chapter 1470. Duguni's instant defeat of Zheng Kaiqiao had caused quite a commotion in the crowd. No one dared to look down on this unprepossessing fellow. The following matches were as exciting as ever. However, not many could attract Nie Tian's attention. Apart from the few people who had fought previously, there was also a one-armed man. His strength was somewhat strange. Although he didn't display any particularly powerful battle strength, he had never been defeated. This slightly attracted Nie Tian's attention. The first day of the tournament quickly came to an end. After Nie Tian returned to his residence, he began to wholeheartedly study the Star Soul armor. In the following matches, if he wanted to seize the title of Low God, he had to display the full power of the Star Soul armor. After a night's study, Nie Tian's understanding of the Star Soul armor deepened. In order to display the full power of the Star Soul armor, the most important thing was to enhance one's own strength. The stronger a martial artist was, the more powerful the star soul armor would be. For the next few days, Nie Tion's matches went smoothly. He didn't encounter any particularly powerful opponent. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. In his room, Nie Tion stood up. His eyes revealed a blazing sharpness. His entire being seemed incomparably sharp. Over the past few days, he had consumed several divine pellets. To his surprise, he discovered that the flame of chaos could quickly help him refine the divine pellets and absorb the energy within them. This was a very abnormal ability. It should be known that an ordinary cultivator might need several months or even several years to completely refine a divine pill after consuming it. Nie Tion had refined a divine pellet in just a few days. This kind of speed was very frightening. I have the twin supreme flames and demonic yuan in my body. Under the stimulation of the divine pellet, my strength is faintly showing signs of advancing to late-stage low god. The corner of Nie Tion's mouth curved into a smile. He said faintly, "As long as I advance to late-stage low god, the star soul armor's power will be even greater. I will then be able to fight Luoxian and Jianxiu." A short while later, Nie Tion arrived at the arena. Today's demigod competition was going to be very intense, because today, the top 24 would participate in the final battle for the championship. Nie Tion had already won 10 matches. He only needed to fight one more match today. Even if he lost this match, he would still be able to enter the top 24. Then, the Elder in Green announced the first match of the day. It was Nie Tion's match. Nie Tion's figure flashed and descended onto the arena. Nie Tion! Nie Tion! Nie Tion! The moment he landed on the ground, there was a tsunami of cheers from the stands. After a few days of competition, everyone had already witnessed Nie Tion's strength. They had long since viewed him as one of the key figures in the fight for the title of Lesser God Champion. Nie Tion had yet to be defeated. Such a battle record was rare. Nie Tion's expression was calm, and his eyes were like water, without the slightest ripple. His current state of mind was very stable. When people looked down on him, he didn't care. When people cheered for him, he didn't care. In the end, these people were just spectators. Whether Nie Tion won or lost, it didn't really matter to them. Nie Tion's figure landed on the arena. Almost at the same time, someone landed opposite him. "It's him." Nie Tion frowned slightly. Looking at the person in front of him, he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. This person was the one-armed martialist he had been paying attention to. Although this guy hadn't displayed much battle strength, he had never lost. Until now, he had maintained an undefeated record. Nie Tion remembered that this person seemed to be from the Seven Knights' Divine Palace. His name was Xian Wuhan. The Seven Knights' Divine Palace, like the Cloud-Splitting Divine Palace, the Heaven Sword Divine Palace, and the Medicine King Divine Palace, was one of the top 4 palaces of the 12 Divine Palaces. Xian Wuhan didn't seem to be very famous in the Seven Knights' Divine Palace. Moreover, no one knew his name. At this moment, Xian Wuhan saw that his opponent was Nie Tion. He couldn't help but frown slightly. Then, he laughed and said, "I am Xian Wuhan from the Seven Knights' Divine Palace. Please advise me, Brother Nie." Unexpectedly, Xian Wuhan seemed to be very friendly towards Nie Tion. Nie Tion remembered that Xian Wuhan had never spoken a word when she was fighting before. "Please," Nie Tion replied calmly. He took a step forward and released his sword aura. A terrifying sword intent surged around him. His entire person was like an unsheathed sword, sharp and sharp. Xian Wuhan's lips curled into a strange smile. Then, a bone saber appeared in his hand. The sword intent around him coalesced into a shadow of a saber. Its aura was vast and powerful. Saber vein saber user. Nie Tion's expression darkened. He was surprised. He didn't expect Xian Wuhan to be a saber user. Moreover, he had reached the saber vein realm. Previously, when Xian Wuhan fought with others, he didn't use his saber. It seemed that this person had indeed hidden his strength. He couldn't be underestimated. You hid your strength well. If you didn't release your sword intent, I wouldn't even know that you were a saber user, Nie Tian said with a smile. The previous opponents were too weak. They weren't worthy of me using my saber. However, Brother Nie's strength is shocking. If I didn't use my saber, I'm afraid I would be defeated in one move, Xian Wuhan said with a smile. He seemed very humble. Nie Tian's lips curled into a smile. His evaluation of Xian Wuhan was even higher now. Having lived 2 lives, he had seen many people. Of course, he knew that the more harmless a person looked, the more dangerous they would become once they moved. Nie Tian vaguely felt that Xian Wuhan's strength was not as simple as a saber-veined saber user. He definitely had other hidden strength. The strangest thing about Xian Wuhan to Nie Tian was his single arm. That single arm seemed to contain a terrifying power. The fact that Xian Wuhan was able to hide his strength so perfectly must have something to do with that broken arm. Make your move. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice. His eyes instantly became stern. Against such an opponent, he had to give it his all. Brother Nie, be careful. Xian Wuhan's eyes twitched. He suddenly raised his bone saber and slashed out. Immediately, a ferocious sword intent was released. The light from the saber gushed out and a 1,000-meter-long saber shadow formed instantly. It descended from the sky and headed for Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned slightly. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. Xian Wuhan's battle prowess was above his expectations. Just this slash alone was more terrifying than the sword spring from the other day. Xian Wuhan's slash looked simple and unadorned, but it was extremely powerful and powerful. This was absolute power that could not be avoided. Nie Tian raised his long sword and stabbed out. The shadow of the sword soared into the sky and rushed towards the saber shadow. Kaboom! Suddenly, there was a loud explosion in the air. The saber and the sword collided. Endless saber light and sword shadows filled the air and turned into waves of chi that rippled across the battle arena. Luckily, the battle arena had the support of a divine matrix and was extremely sturdy. Otherwise, if the two of them clashed, the battle arena would not be able to withstand it. Bang! The next moment there was a muffled sound. The two of them retreated dozens of meters before they steadied themselves. In the first exchange of blows, the two of them were evenly matched. Chapter 1471. On the competition platform, Nie Tian noticed Xian Wuhan's strange gaze and could not help but frown. It was as if Xian Wuhan wanted something from Nie Tian. Her gaze was so intense. Xian Wuhan's strength had exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. This caught him off guard. "Let's see how much strength you've been hiding," Nie Tian bellowed. Apparently, he was somewhat angry. As he growled, Nie Tian slashed with his sword. Hundreds and thousands of sword shadows appeared in the air. They were like arrows that filled the sky, pressing down on Xian Wuhan. Xian Wuhan smiled slightly. She did not care about this kind of attack. Her eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. The tyrant beast bone blade in her hand spun. A hurricane-like saber essence swirled up a huge saber essence whirlpool. It suddenly slashed out and attacked Nie Tian. Smart. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He smiled faintly and slashed down with his absolute heaven slash. The double weirdness of heaven and earth appeared. Two giant black snakes burned with a terrifying chaotic eye and roared. The sword shadows that filled the sky were just a distraction to attract Xian Wuhan's attention. However, Xian Wuhan was very smart. She did not fall for it. Instead, she directly attacked Nie Tian. Nie Tian's reaction was fast. He combined the extreme starry sky ancient martial technique and slashed down violently. In midair, the two giant black snakes merged into one. With a roll of their huge bodies, they shattered the whirlpool of saber intent. Huh! When Xian Wuhan saw this, he could not help but be surprised. He did not expect Nye Tian's move to be so terrifying. It forcefully broke through his saber essence whirlpool. However, Xian Wuhan's reaction was also very fast. He raised the tyrant beast bone blade, and an extremely overbearing force flew out. It swept diagonally across the sky. Suddenly, a huge saber shadow spread out. The sharp and violent aura seemed to want to engulf everything. Boom! It was another extremely tragic collision. The void shook slightly, and surging waves of air surged out, forcing Nye Tian to retreat. Xian Wuhan was closer to the epicenter of the collision. Although she had retreated at the first instant, she was still affected by the shock waves, and several bloody wounds appeared on her body. This level of saber and sword intent was extremely sharp, even sharper than a sharp blade. Just a slight touch would cause blood to flow. Xian Wuhan steadied herself. Her body trembled, and the wound on her body instantly stopped bleeding. The wound healed immediately. Saber-veined saber cultivators had their saber intent and saber soul fused into their meridians. Their martial body was very strong. This small injury was nothing. However, Xian Wuhan was injured after all. In this exchange, he was at a disadvantage. What a powerful duo! In the viewing gallery, the eyes of the crowd were trembling. They had never imagined that the battle between Nye Tian and Xian Wuhan would be so intense. People had originally thought that Nye Tian would be able to kill Xian Wuhan in a second. They had not imagined that the latter had hidden her strength so deeply. In the pavilion high up in the sky, the Holy Adjudicator and the Palace Lords were also slightly stunned. The battle up to this point had exceeded their expectations. Who would have thought that an unknown warrior from the Seven Knights' Divine Palace would have such strength? This is really surprising, the Azure Sun Palace Lord said in a strange tone with a playful smile. Yes. Qi Yifeng also frowned. He looked at the Seven Knights' Palace Lord and said, "The Seven Knights' Divine Palace has hidden their strength so deeply. It seems that they are going to shine this time." At that moment, the Seven Knights' Palace Lord frowned. He stared at Xian Wuhan, looking very strange. Of course, he recognized Xian Wuhan. However, Xian Wuhan had not displayed such powerful combat strength before. Why had she suddenly become so powerful? What a good Xian Wuhan! You have indeed hidden your strength deeply. Even I have been fooled by you. The Seven Knights' Palace Lord smiled in his heart. However, Xian Wuhan's strength was very strong. This was definitely a good thing for the Seven Knights' Divine Palace. The Seven Knights' Divine Palace even saw hope in Xian Wuhan to fight for the first place among the lower deities. On the arena, Nye Tian and Xian Wuhan exchanged a few more blows. They were equally matched. Xian Wuhan's knife path realm was stronger than Nye Tian's. However, Nye Tian had many types of sword wills in his body. Coupled with the dual flames, he was able to fight Xian Wuhan head-on. Nye Tian, I'm done playing with you. The next move will decide the winner. Xian Wuhan's figure stood high in the sky. She suddenly smiled cold. The knife will around her suddenly became violent. The killing aura around her also became more and more intense. Her entire person was like a huge knife hanging high in the sky, ferocious and domineering. Huh! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He knew that Xian Wuhan was about to reveal her true strength. He could not help but be cautious. This battle was not very important to Nye Tian. Even if he lost, he could still enter the top 24. He would not reveal his trump card at this time, but he would try his best. Winning was better than losing. All right. Nye Tian let out a low roar, and his eyes instantly became fierce. He raised his heaven-sword, and a strand of strange flame appeared on the blade of the sword, burning like starlight, dazzling everyone's eyes. Star Soul Divine Armor. Let me test the power of the Star Soul Flame first, Nye Tian said in his heart. A strange smile appeared on his lips. Of course, he would not use the entire Star Soul Divine Armor. He would only use the Star Soul Flame. Xian Wuhan saw the flame on Nie Tian's blade and felt a strange power. However, she did not take it to heart. Previously, Nie Tian's sword will also contained a strong fire attribute power. There was nothing strange about it. Kill! With a thought, Xian Wuhan roared angrily. All the saber intent in his body exploded, forming a 1,000-meter-long illusion of a huge beast outside his body. The gigantic beast let out a roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The entire world seemed to be trembling. Boom! In the next moment, the colossal beast rolled over, roared, and charged directly towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. There was not fear in his eyes, but extreme killing intent. Kill! With the same angry roar, the sky-cleaving sword slashed down. Endless sword will instantly gushed out. In the void, a huge sword shadow appeared. There was a layer of dazzling starlight circulating on it. The light spread out for tens of thousands of meters. Even the sun and moon seemed to have dimmed. The crowd's eyes became blazing hot at this moment. Their hearts were in their throat. Everyone knew that the next moment would be the moment to determine the winner between the two. Nie Tian. Emo Rushi and Cher called out Nie Tian's name in their hearts. Their eyes were fixed on the battle stage, afraid that something would happen to Nie Tian. Boom! In the middle of the battle stage, sword will and knife will surged. The knife-bone frenzy beast and the starlight sword shadow collided with each other. In an instant, the void suddenly became stagnant. It was as if time and space had stopped for a moment. Boom! Immediately, endless knife will and sword will collided with each other. They devoured each other and attacked each other. An ear-piercing sound came from the void. The two forces were too strong. They could not destroy each other in a short period of time. The void continued to release waves of air that spread out for thousands of meters. Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan stood in the void, not giving way to each other. Their foreheads were covered in sweat. Chapter 1472. Kaboom! In the air, the starlight sword suddenly released a strong astral sacred flame. Suddenly, a violent force was released and rushed towards the blade-bone beast. Bang, bang, bang! Endless muffled sounds could be heard as waves of violent energy exploded. The huge body of the blade-bone frenzy beast was filled with countless cracks. Its entire body was on the verge of collapsing, as if it was going to collapse at any time. Huh! Seeing this, Xian Wuhan couldn't help but frown. She didn't think that the astral sacred flame on Nie Tian's sword would be so strange. It could actually release such a terrifying force at such a critical moment. Xian Wuhan's eyes flashed quickly, as if she was thinking about something. Bang! However, at that moment a loud explosion was heard. The blade-bone beast suddenly collapsed. An infinite amount of knife will dispersed, wreaking havoc in the air. Suddenly, Xian Wuhan felt a strong force pressing down on her. She wanted to retreat, but it was too late. Oh no! Xian Wuhan screamed in her heart. With a thought, the severed arm suddenly stretched out. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't know what Xian Wuhan was going to do. In the next moment, an extremely strange scene appeared. Xian Wuhan stretched out her broken arm. Suddenly, an infinite amount of black light gushed out. In an instant, a whole arm grew out. Xian Wuhan slammed her palm against the starlight sword. Then, she retreated, escaping from the attack range of the starlight sword. The starlight sword, which was at the end of its flight, could no longer withstand Xian Wuhan's attack. It suddenly collapsed and dissipated into sword will. After a long time, the sky above the arena became clear again. Two silhouettes stood in the air, facing each other. What happened? The crowd looked at the two of them in shock. They didn't know what had happened. Just now, because the knife will and sword will were too strong, Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan's silhouettes were engulfed in it. No one saw what had happened. Xian Wuhan, looks like you've been hiding a lot of your strength. Nie Tian looked at Xian Wuhan and smiled. He thought to himself, your broken arm is indeed not simple. Xian Wuhan's expression was extremely ugly. She forced a smile and said, "Nie Tian, didn't you also hide your strength?" "Same here." Xian Wuhan had thought that she had hidden her abilities very well. She had not expected that Nie Tian's abilities were just as strange. Of course, he could see that in the last collision, Nie Tian was able to win because of that wisp of starlight flame. Xian Wuhan could not understand what that wisp of starlight flame was. How could it explode with such terrifying power that even his blade-bone-frenzied beast could not withstand it? Nie Tian was also shocked in his heart. The strength of the astral soul flame had far surpassed his expectations. At this moment, he was only using one of the 4 astral soul treasures. If he were to use all 4 treasures at the same time, it was unknown what kind of terrifying power he would be able to unleash. However, Nie Tian could tell that Xian Wuhan was not giving it her all. The instant the star soul flame erupted, Xian Wuhan hesitated for a moment. She must have been considering whether she should use even more power. However, he had underestimated the explosive power of the star soul flame and was forced to use his broken arm in a hurry. Nie Tian could sense that Xian Wuhan's severed arm was like some kind of seal, restricting the power in his body. If the seal on his severed arm was undone, Xian Wuhan's power would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. It seemed that Xian Wuhan felt that this battle was not that important. It was not worth it for him to use his trump card. After all, he was the same as Nie Tian. He had already won 10 battles. Whether he won or lost this battle, he would be able to enter the top 24. Xian Wuhan, do you still want to continue this battle? Nie Tian asked provocatively with a smile. He had already gained the upper hand. If Xian Wuhan wanted to continue fighting, he would be happy to oblige. I have already said that the previous move was the deciding move. Since I have lost, there is no need to continue fighting. I admit defeat for this battle, Xian Wuhan said solemnly. His eyes were filled with determination. His words were clear. He admitted defeat for this battle. However, the next battle would not be so easy. All right, I look forward to the next battle with you. Nie Tian smiled. He also wanted to see what kind of terrifying power was sealed within Xian Wuhan's severed arm. The bitter battle ended with Nie Tian's victory. The crowd's eyes flickered as they shifted between Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan. Although Xian Wuhan had lost, to be able to fight with Nie Tian to this point, he was already a shining dark horse in this tournament. From now on, no one dared to underestimate Xian Wuhan. Even Luo Xian, Jian Qiu, and the other spectators had a slight change in their expressions. They could tell that Xian Wuhan had concealed his strength. The sudden appearance of someone who could rival Nie Tian meant that this low-god battle was bound to be even more bitter. Nie Tian did not waste any more words and left the arena. Emo Rushi and Cher were overjoyed to see that Nie Tian was fine. The following battles were relatively normal. They were not as bitter as Nie Tian and Xian Wuhan's. A day later, the top 24 were announced. Apart from Nie Tian, Luo Xian, Jian Qiu, Shui Wushuang, and Du Guanai had all entered the top 24 with complete victories. Xian Wuhan, Jian Chun, and the other experts of the Divine Palace had also entered the top 24. The top 24 of this year's Lower God competition have been decided. Next, all the participants will have a day to rest. I hope that everyone will be in good condition for the battle for the first Lower God position. The azure-robed old man announced loudly, indicating that everyone could leave. Nie Tian let out a deep breath. The tournament would be suspended for a day to allow the participants time to adjust. Nie Tian planned to use this day to attempt to break through to the late-stage Low God realm. Nie Tian, Emo Rushi, and Schwer left together. Before long, the three returned to the small courtyard they were staying in. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, Nie Tian sensed a familiar aura. He frowned and thought to himself, what is Dugu Lingtian doing here? Nie Tian was puzzled when he sensed Dugu Lingtian's aura. This guy had been here not long ago. He had no idea what he was up to. Dugu Lingtian didn't show himself. Instead, he sent a voice transmission to Nie Tian. Nie Tian, I've brought a lord here. He wants to meet with Her Highness. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Although he did not ask Cher to join the inescapable net, Dugu Lingtian was very persistent in addressing Cher as Her Highness. I'm sorry, but Cher won't meet anyone. Please leave, Nie Tian replied coldly with a frown. He did not ask who wanted to meet Cher. Instead, he directly refused. Nie Tian, I know the relationship between you and Her Highness, so I don't want to disobey you. However, this meeting is very important. Please accept it. At this moment, a low voice rang out. It was extremely hoarse and gave off a surreal feeling. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He did not notice the presence of this person. After a moment of pondering, Nie Tian sent a voice transmission. Who are you? Inescapable Net, Earth Chief, the person said in a deep voice. The man spoke in a deep voice. Immediately after, a shadow flashed in front of Nie Tian, revealing a face that was as dark as an abyss. Earth Chief. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat, and his expression flickered. He remembered that the inescapable net had two supremes, Heaven Chief and Earth Chief. Chapter 1473. In the small courtyard, Nie Tian frowned slightly. He didn't expect that the person who appeared with Dugu Lingtian would be one of the inescapable net's Heaven and Earth leaders, Earth Leader. Since Earth Leader was a supreme figure of the inescapable net, and the inescapable net was one of the top forces in the 9 realms, then Earth Leader's strength should be at the peak of the God realm. Nie Tian had never seen such a terrifying figure before. Even Yi Qinghai and Ming Hui probably hadn't reached the peak of the God realm. Nie Tian, don't worry. I definitely won't harm Her Highness. I just want to verify something with her, Earth Leader said solemnly. Although his voice was calm, it contained a decisive and domineering tone. Nie Tian's eyes flashed. He thought for a moment and smiled. Lord Earth Leader is visiting personally. It's useless even if I refuse, right? With Earth Leader's strength, he could completely ignore Nie Tian and directly take Cher away. However, he didn't do so. Instead, he made a request to Nie Tian, and his attitude was very sincere. This was already very rare. If Nie Tian refused, then he would be forcing Earth Leader to use force. Nie Tian, as I said just now, you have a special relationship with Her Highness, so I'll respect your opinion. But if you want to stop me, then I won't be polite. Earth Leader's voice sounded, and there was a hint of oppression in his tone. Nie Tian frowned. He knew that he couldn't stop Earth Leader, so he smiled and said, You can see Cher, but I must be present. Nie Tian didn't know what Earth Leader wanted from Cher, so he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Sure. Unexpectedly, Earth Chief agreed without the slightest hesitation and was extremely straightforward. Okay. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, Elder Dugu, wait for me in the valley where we met last time. Cher and I will be there soon. Earth Leader and Dugu Lingtian responded and disappeared. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown deeply when he felt their auras disappear. What was the relationship between Cher and the inescapable net? Why did the inescapable net keep pestering her? Last time, it was Dugu Lingtian. This time, even the Earth Chief had appeared. Next time, it would probably be the Heaven Chief. Nie Tian sighed inwardly, but he didn't show it on his face. He turned to Mo Rushi and said, Rushi, Cher and I are going to see someone. We'll be back soon. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, but she did not ask any questions. She just nodded lightly and reminded Nie Tian to be careful. Nie Tian left with Cher, heading towards the valley of the Scarlet Moon mountain range. Nie Tian, who are we going to see? Cher hugged Nie Tian's arm, her gem-like eyes twinkling. She looked like a pure and innocent little girl. You'll know when we get there. Nie Tian looked at Cher and smiled faintly. He said inwardly, Cher, no matter what your identity is, you're still my Cher. No one can change that. A moment later, Nye Tian and Cher appeared in the valley. Dugu Ling Tian was already waiting in the valley, and there was a strange figure standing beside him. It was a mass of black qi, and one could vaguely see that it was humanoid. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the humanoid mass of black qi. He hadn't seen the true appearance of the Earth Chief before, and had only heard the latter's voice. Now that he saw the true form of the Earth Chief, he couldn't help but be shocked. The Earth Chief was completely different from what he had imagined. The mass of black qi wasn't tall, and it seemed to be a teenager. It was shorter than a normal person by a head, and its appearance was somewhat immature. It didn't look like an old monster at all. Nye Tian sent his divine sense over, wanting to find out something. However, before his divine sense could spread out, it was blocked by a strange force and bounced back, causing him to tremble and almost fall. The Earth Chief stood there as if he was in another spacetime. He was like a mountain or a sea, and his aura was majestic. Although his aura was already restrained, he still gave off a majestic and unapproachable feeling. Of course, the Earth Chief knew that Nye Tian was trying to sense him, but he didn't show it. His gaze trembled, and he locked onto Cher. His figure suddenly moved, and he came to Cher's side. He directly knelt down and said respectfully, "The inescapable net, the Earth Chief, and the Earth Chief greet your Highness." Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't expect the Earth Chief to do this. Dugu Ling Tian was also stunned, but he immediately reacted. He quickly knelt down and said, "The inescapable net's inner sect elder, Dugu Ling Tian, greets your Highness." Cher's small face froze, and she subconsciously retreated to Nye Tian's side. She was like a startled deer, and she whispered, "Nye Tian, who are they?" Nye Tian was also speechless, and he thought to himself, a bunch of people with unclear minds. Nye Tian hadn't expected that the mighty paragon of the heavenly dragnet would actually kneel to Schwerer, which caught him off guard. Seeing that the Earth Chief and Dugu Ling Tian didn't have any intention of standing up, Nye Tian could only say to Cher, "Cher, let them stand up." Cher's small face tensed up, and she whispered, You can stand up." "Thank you, Your Highness." Earth Chief and Dugu Ling Tian respectfully responded before they dared to stand up. It was only now that Nye Tian realized that the inescapable net had such a high status. Cher's identity seemed to be getting more and more mysterious. "Lord Earth Chief, you've scared Cher." Nye Tian frowned slightly, and he said to the Earth Chief, "What do you want to ask?" "Just ask it." The Earth Chief nodded slightly and took a step forward. He looked at Cher with his abyss-like eyes and said, "Your Highness, I know that you haven't recovered your memories of 3 lifetimes, but there are some things that you definitely won't forget, such as this." With that, a black compass appeared in the Earth Chief's hand, and he directly handed it to Cher. He said, "Your Highness, please activate the 3 lives reincarnation disc to point out the path for the inescapable net." The 3 lives reincarnation disc. Nye Tian was stunned. He looked at the black compass, and he couldn't help but take a step forward to take it. Nye Tian. The Earth Chief clearly didn't expect that Nye Tian would go forward to take the 3 lives reincarnation disc. He cried out in shock, and his aura rose from his body. It was as if a boundless ocean had appeared behind him, and a vast and boundless power seemed to flow out endlessly. Nye Tian immediately felt a tremendous force pressing down on him. His body trembled, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood, which just happened to spray onto the 3 lives reincarnation disc. When Cher saw that Nye Tian was injured, she rebuked him, and anger appeared on her delicate face. "What are you doing?" Earth Chief's body trembled, and his aura instantly dissipated. He immediately knelt down and said in fear, "This subordinate was reckless. Please forgive me, Your Highness." Cher ignored the Earth Chief and went to Nye Tian's side. She asked anxiously, "Nye Tian, are you all right?" Nye Tian shook his head slightly, indicating that he was fine. In that instant, he had felt a tremendous force pressing down on him. It was an irresistible force that left him in despair. The Earth Chief was too terrifying. If not for Cher stopping him in time, Nye Tian would have definitely died on the spot, and even his demonic essence would have been destroyed. At that moment Nye Tian frowned. He suddenly discovered that the blood he had just spat out had been absorbed by the Three Lives reincarnation disc. Chapter 1474. What's going on? Nye Tian looked at the flashing Three Lives samsara disc with a confused expression. He had no idea what was going on. He could vaguely sense a connection forming between himself and the Three Lives samsara disc. It was a soul connection. Although it was weak, it truly existed. In the next moment, the Three Lives samsara disc released more and more light. Rings of rainbow light filled the entire mountain valley. It was extremely dazzling. At this moment, many unfamiliar scenes appeared in Nye Tian's mind. Giant primordial beasts, unbroken glaciers, boundless oceans, ancient altars, giant primordial formations, towering primordial experts, and tragic battlefields where blood flowed like rivers and corpses piled up like mountains. Some completely unfamiliar scenes echoed in Nye Tian's mind, causing his divine sense to be greatly shaken. This Earth Chief saw the Three Lives reincarnation disc suddenly flicker and immediately cried out in shock. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. The Three Lives samsara disc is the Netherworld Emperor's origin soul. How can he activate it? Earth Chief couldn't believe his eyes. Nye Tian had unintentionally activated the Three Lives samsara disc. But the Three Lives samsara disc was the Netherworld Emperor's origin soul. How could Nye Tian activate it? This was absolutely impossible. Earth Chief had wanted to see Cher because he wanted Cher to activate the Three Lives samsara disc. However, the scene in front of him had exceeded his expectations. The person who had activated the Three Lives samsara disc was not Cher, but Nye Tian. At this moment, endless memories flashed through Nye Tian's mind. He felt as if his soul was about to be torn apart, and he couldn't help but scream. Nye Tian! Cher cried out when she saw this. She seemed to think of something, and her little face became filled with terror. She was worried that if the evil energy in Nye Tian's blood was released, it would be disastrous. Scoundrel, what did you do to Nye Tian? In a moment of desperation, Cher rebuked him and cast a cold glance at Earth Chief. Earth Chief was terrified, and he said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, he has activated the reincarnation wheel. I don't know what's going on either." Cher paid no attention to Earth Chief, and instead looked at Nye Tian with a burning gaze, fearing that the latter would go berserk. After a while, the light on the Three Lives samsara disc gradually dimmed, and Nye Tian gradually calmed down. The endless memories in his mind receded like the tide. Nye Tian's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. His face was as pale as paper, and he was still in a state of shock. He recalled the scene that had just happened and tried hard to recall something, but all he could remember were some incomplete images. Those memories had mysteriously disappeared. Nye Tian let out a long breath and suddenly looked at Earth Chief, who was still kneeling on the ground. He said in a deep voice, "Earth Chief, what exactly is the Three Lives samsara disc?" Earth Chief was suddenly stunned. He raised his head to look at Nye Tian, and his sinister eyes flickered as if he was observing something. When he confirmed that Nye Tian hadn't obtained the memories in the Three Lives samsara disc, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. He said, "The Three Lives samsara disc is a holy artifact of our inescapable net. I originally wanted Your Highness to activate it, but it was activated by you." Nye Tian's eyes were dark, and he had no idea what Earth Chief was saying. At this time, Nye Tian looked down at the Three Lives samsara disc and discovered that there were many strange runes on it. They were extremely strange in shape, and they seemed to be ancient characters. Ancient Ming characters. At the same time, a cry rang out in Nye Tian's mind. It was Di Shi Tian's voice. However, Deshir Tion's figure only flashed for a moment before disappearing. Nye Tion frowned and his face was filled with shock. He suddenly understood that Earth Chief wanted to activate the 3 Lives Samsara disc and let Cher recover her memories at the same time. The 3 Lives Samsara disc contained a huge amount of memories, but these memories didn't belong to Nye Tion, so they only appeared in his mind once. If the person who had activated the 3 Lives Samsara disc had been Cher, these memories would probably have remained in Cher's mind forever. Just now, Earth Chief had said that the princess hadn't recovered her memories of 3 lifetimes. The memories imprisoned in the 3 Lives Samsara disc were the so-called memories of 3 lifetimes. At this thought, Nye Tion couldn't help but gasp. Fortunately, he was the one who had activated the 3 Lives Samsara disc, and not Cher. Otherwise, Cher would probably have become a different person. He wasn't afraid that Cher would recover her memories, but he felt that it wasn't time for Cher to recover her memories yet. Moreover, he wasn't sure that the memories in the 3 Lives Samsara disc definitely belonged to Cher. In the scenes that had flashed through his mind just now, there was no sign of Cher. At this moment, Earth Chief stood up and stretched out his hand. Nye Tion, please hand the 3 Lives Samsara disc to Her Highness. Let her examine it personally. His cold voice was filled with a strong sense of oppression. Nye Tion frowned slightly. After thinking for a moment, he handed the 3 Lives Samsara disc to Cher. Cher held the 3 Lives Samsara disc and looked at it for a long time, but she didn't find anything. She pouted and said, "What's so interesting about a broken disc?" As she said that, Cher directly threw the 3 Lives Samsara disc to Earth Chief and said in a cold voice, "Here you go." However, as soon as she threw the 3 Lives Samsara disc, it spun in the air and returned to her hand. The 3 Lives Samsara disc has recognized a master. Earth Chief's eyes trembled when he saw this, and a scene appeared in his mind. In a mystic realm of the inescapable net, there was a boundless array that stood in the air like a guardian of the world. This array had existed for an unknown period of time, but it didn't move at all. Boom. However, at this moment, the formation seemed to have sensed something, and it suddenly began to circulate. The entire world instantly trembled without end, and an endless amount of energy was released. An evil eye actually slowly condensed in the sky above the formation, and it overlooked the entire world. The 3 Lives Samsara array has been activated. The eye of the Underworld Emperor has been opened. Earth Chief's eyes flickered fiercely. He had asked Cher to activate the 3 Lives Samsara disc in order to activate the 3 Lives Samsara array and awaken the eye of the Underworld Emperor. At the same time, Cher seemed to sense something. Her beautiful eyes flickered for a moment before she regained her composure. Her lips curled up helplessly as she looked at Nye Tion and murmured, "Nye Tion, this broken plate seems to have locked onto me. I can't shake it off no matter how hard I try." Nye Tion was speechless. Earth Chief had already said that the 3 Lives Samsara disc was a holy artifact of the inescapable net, but in Cher's hands, it had become a broken plate. "Your Highness, this subordinate has important matters to attend to and cannot stay any longer. I will take my leave now." Earth Chief had regained his composure and knelt in front of Cher as he spoke respectfully. "You may leave," Cher said indifferently as she waved her hand. "This subordinate will take his leave," Earth Chief replied. He seemed to be in a hurry as he directly tore through the void and left. Dugu Lingtian did not have the means to do so he could only leave and disappear in the blink of an eye. Nye Tion looked at the 2 people who left in a hurry with a puzzled expression. There were thousands of mysteries in his mind. What exactly was the 3 Lives Samsara disc? What did it have to do with Cher? What was Earth Chief's purpose in asking Cher to activate the 3 Lives Samsara disc? All of this was like a huge boulder weighing down on Nye Tion's heart. Unfortunately, his current strength was too weak, and he could not solve these mysteries. "Nye Tion, I feel very strange. It seems that when this plate is with me, my strength is constantly increasing. At this moment, Cher suddenly looked at Nye Tian with a puzzled expression and murmured. Nye Tian was slightly taken aback. He looked at Cher and his expression immediately changed. He suddenly sensed that Cher's strength had mysteriously increased to the peak of a low god. Chapter 1475. Shui, your strength. In the valley, Nye Tian looked at Shui with his mouth wide open, but he was too shocked to say a word. He clearly remembered that before entering the valley, Cher's strength was only at the early stage of the low god stage. But now, she had actually reached the peak of the low god stage, and even showed faint signs of advancing to the mid-god stage. In an instant, Cher's strength had unknowingly advanced by almost a whole realm. This was really too strange, and it made Nye Tian completely dumbfounded. A godly state warrior's lifespan was extremely long, but the advancement of one's realm was also very slow. Under normal circumstances, to advance from the early stage of the low god stage to the peak of the low god stage, even a supreme monstrous genius would most likely need hundreds, or even thousands of years. But Cher had achieved such a huge advancement in strength in the blink of an eye. If others saw this scene, they would definitely think of her as a monster. In fact, Cher's advancement had always been leaps and bounds. Back then, she also directly advanced to the godly state. Although he had long known that Cher's identity was extraordinary, Nye Tian was still stunned by the scene in front of him. Cher also had a dumbfounded look on her face, and couldn't react for a long time. Nye Tian forced himself to calm down, and he used his divine sense to sense the changes in Cher's body. He couldn't help but frown, and his gaze was fixed on the 3 lives samsara plate in Cher's hand. He discovered that the 3 lives samsara disc contained a power that was as majestic as the sea. When he tried to sense this power with his divine sense, it was as if he had entered a vast ocean. He could not sense anything, only the purest vastness. Nye Tian's gaze trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. This power was too terrifying, and he had never seen such a terrifying power. Seeing that there were beads of sweat on Nye Tian's forehead, Cher couldn't help but take a step forward and asked worriedly, Nye Tian, are you all right? Nye Tian waved his hand slightly and asked, Cher, did you sense anything from the 3 lives samsara disc? Cher pursed her lips and her gem-like eyes flickered as she said, I can feel a force desperately rushing into my body. I can't resist it. Nye Tian frowned. He could vaguely sense that Cher's instantaneous increase in strength was due to the power she had absorbed from the 3 lives samsara disc. However, he really couldn't understand how such a small samsara disc could contain such great power. Just now, when Nye Tian had personally held the reincarnation disc and even activated it, other than those memories, he hadn't felt any terrifying power. All of this was too strange. Of course, Nye Tian couldn't imagine that the samsara disc's power actually came from the 3 lives reincarnation array. The 3 lives reincarnation formation was a rank 9 god formation. The power contained within it was enough to destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. The increase in Cher's strength was so bizarre. The moment the 3 lives reincarnation formation activated, tremendous power surged into her body through the 3 lives samsara disc. At this moment, Nye Tian wanted to take a look at the 3 lives samsara disc, but he discovered that the 3 lives samsara disc seemed to have fused with Cher. Even when he held it in his hand, he still couldn't sense anything. Nye Tian suddenly recalled what Earth Chief had said earlier. The 3 lives samsara disc had recognized a master. It seemed that the 3 lives samsara disc had already recognized Cher as its master and would never leave her again. Earlier, Earth Chief had even said that the 3 lives samsara disc belonged to the Emperor of the Netherworld. Why was Nye Tian able to activate the samsara disc? Why can I activate the samsara disc? How strange. Nye Tian frowned, confusion filling his face. Because you have the power of Cher's bloodline in your body. Just at this moment, Sakra's voice suddenly sounded, but it was somewhat grave. He said, "Back when you were condensing devil aura, you drank a large amount of Cher's blood, and the power of Cher's bloodline seeped into your devil aura. This is the reason why you can activate the samsara disc. In that case, it's actually Cher's power that activated the samsara disc." Nyetian was stunned and his gaze trembled slightly. He then asked, "Sakra, how can Cher's strength increase so quickly? Where does the power of the 3 lives samsara disc come from?" The 3 lives samsara disc is connected to a great formation, and its power comes from that great formation. When the 3 lives samsara disc is activated, that great formation is activated as well. Sakra's voice became even graver as he said, "Cher's strength is impacted by the power of the great formation and instantly increases. Then, it slows down, but it's definitely a speed that surpasses ordinary people." "So that's how it is." Nia Tian nodded slightly and smiled. "Looks like this is a good thing." "Maybe." Sakra sighed and didn't say anything else. His figure flashed and disappeared. Returning to the origin embryo space, Sakra's expression became very ugly, and even a little frightened. He murmured, "The 3 lives samsara disc is activated. Is the Emperor of the Netherworld imprisoned in the underground Devil Palace really going to awaken? What kind of disaster will that heaven-punishing demon bring to this world?" After saying that, Sakra shook his head and smiled bitterly. He hoped that Nye Tian could grow up before the Emperor of the Netherworld awakened. Otherwise, no one in the 9 domains could stop the Emperor of the Netherworld. Of course, Nye Tian didn't know about Sakra's reaction. He was very happy that Cher's strength increased. Next, Nye Tian found that the speed at which Cher's strength increased gradually slowed down. It was no longer as terrifying as before. He didn't waste any more time and left the valley with Cher. After returning to the small courtyard, Nye Tian let Cher enter the room to cultivate and stabilize her strength. "Nye Tian, did something happen to Cher?" In the small courtyard, Emo Rushi seemed to have sensed something. She looked at Nye Tian with a worried expression and asked. Nye Tian's brows furrowed slightly. After a moment of pondering, he decided to tell Emo Rushi everything that had happened to Cher. Although Emo Rushi was only a few years older than Cher, she was much more mature than Cher. In that case, Cher is being targeted by the inescapable net. Emo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered and her pretty face became gloomy. Nye Tian took a step forward and pulled Emo Rushi into his arms. He said softly, "Rushi, don't worry. I won't let anything happen to Cher or you. Although the inescapable net is terrifying, they haven't shown any hostility. So, you don't have to worry too much." Emo Rushi lightly nodded. She wasn't afraid of anything when Nye Tian was by her side. After a short while, Nye Tian returned to his room and began to cultivate. One day later, Nye Tian walked out of his room. His aura was much stronger than before, but he still hadn't broken through to the late-stage low-god realm. "Even though I have the twin flames, my strength is still increasing very slowly," Nye Tian smiled bitterly. He felt helpless when he recalled the speed at which Cher's strength increased. Next, Nye Tian and Emo Rushi went to the martial arena together. Cher was still cultivating. Today was the last day of the grand competition of the 12 shrines. Today would be the day that the champion of the Low God tournament would be revealed. The battle of the top 24 would adopt the cruelest elimination system. The winner would advance and the weakest would be eliminated. Chapter 1476. After a while, the azure-robed old man appeared in the air above the arena. The noisy crowd immediately quieted down and focused their attention on the azure-robed old man. After the azure-robed old man announced some rules, he entered the competition without hesitation and shouted, "Low God competition, the first battle of the top 24. Number 1 versus number 64. When Nye Tian heard the azure-robed old man's voice, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He turned to Emo Rushi and said, "Rushi, I'm going." Mo Rushi nodded lightly. Although there was a smile on her lips, her eyes were filled with worry. Nie Tian stepped forward and landed on the arena. At the same time, another figure appeared and landed opposite Nie Tian. "It's you." Nie Tian was surprised to see the person opposite him. He didn't expect it to be someone he knew. "Jian Chun. We meet again, Nie Tian," Jian Chun said with a cold smile, her eyes brimming with a frosty light. He had fought with Nie Tian before and lost. Now that he met Nie Tian again, there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, they were filled with killing intent. Nie Tian frowned slightly and said with a faint smile, "You lost to me once. This time will not be an exception." "Is that so?" Jian Chun raised his eyebrows, but his eyes were unusually strange. When the crowd saw the two people on the arena, their eyes darkened. They seemed to be somewhat disappointed. Most people knew that Jian Chun had been defeated by Nie Tian before. Now that the two met again, the result should be the same. At the same time, in the pavilion high up in the sky, the holy judge and the others looked at the two people below with great interest. Several palace lords were discussing. Obviously, they were more optimistic about Nie Tian. Jian Wuya, the Heaven Sword Palace Lord, laughed strangely and said, "Everyone, the battle hasn't started yet. It's not good to make a judgment now." The heartbroken young master was slightly stunned. He looked at Jian Wuya and said with a smile, "Jian Wuya, it seems that you are very confident in Jian Chun. Jian Chun is my son. Isn't it normal for me to have confidence in him?" Jian Wuya smiled faintly, looking quite playful. The other palace masters were stunned. They faintly felt that Jian Wuya's words had a deeper meaning. "Make your move." On the arena, Nie Tian spoke indifferently, and then his gaze became piercingly cold and suffused with a brilliant light. "All right." Jian Chun roared and released his sword intent. He held the thorny soaring serpent in his hand, and a green ocean appeared behind him. It was extremely terrifying. Nie Tian frowned a little. He noticed that Jian Chun's sword will was much stronger than last time. It had actually increased by leaps and bounds. Then, he understood that Jian Chun's sword Dao had increased. Nie Tian discovered that Jian Chun's sword Dao realm actually rose from sword vein realm to sword bone realm. Sword vein swordsmen had their sword intent and sword soul fused into their meridians. As for sword bone swordsmen, their sword intent and sword soul fused into the bones of their bodies. This would greatly enhance the body of a martial artist, allowing them to be closer to a sword. At this moment, Jian Chun was standing in midair. His entire body was releasing a sharp aura. He was like a sword, a killing sword. Losing to Nie Tian last time had made Jian Chun feel a great humiliation. This time, he was determined to kill Nie Tian in front of everyone. Only then would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart. Nie Tian sensed the killing intent around Jian Chun and couldn't help but sneer. He said, "No wonder your tone has become arrogant. Turns out that you have advanced to sword bone realm." Arrogant. Jian Chun could hear the ridicule in Nie Tian's words. He immediately roared, and the thorny soaring serpent in his hand shot out. A green sword shadow condensed, and suddenly, the void was filled with a suffocating oppressive aura. Jian Chun's sword spirit thorny soaring serpent contained a very terrifying poison. If the poison invaded the martial body of an ordinary martial artist, they would instantly lose the ability to resist. Nie Tian had experienced this kind of poison before, but he didn't care too much about it. His physique was different from ordinary people. Coupled with the supreme twin flames, he was immune to almost all poisons. Nie Tian's figure moved and he blasted out with his sword. Rumble! In the void, the two sword shadows collided with each other, and a loud rumble erupted. Nie Tian's figure trembled slightly and he took a few steps back. On the other hand, Jian Chun was as steady as Mount Tai. He didn't move an inch. Sword bone swordsman's sword intent is indeed strong. Nie Tian smiled slightly in his heart. He wasn't surprised. His strength and Jian Chun's were two small realms apart. Under such circumstances, it was already very good for him to be able to block Jian Chun's sword. Jian Chun was stunned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be able to easily block his sword. After his sword Dao realm advanced to sword bone realm, Jian Chun's combat strength increased several times. Yet, he still couldn't seriously injure Nie Tian. This made him feel humiliated. A dignified sword bone swordsman couldn't even seriously injure a sword vein swordsman. It was ridiculous. Go to hell. All of a sudden, Jian Chun let out a furious roar and thrust his sword forward 3 times in a row. Immediately afterwards, 3 waves of green aura surged over and madly bore down on Nie Tian like 3 giant green snakes. Nie Tian stood in midair. His eyes were as calm as water and there was no ripple on his face. He carefully felt Jian Chun's sword intent. He wanted to comprehend a higher realm of sword Dao through Jian Chun. Nie Tian was well aware that even though Jian Chun had entered the sword bone stage, her battle prowess was still far inferior to that of Luo Zian, Jian Qiu, and the others. She might not even be able to defeat Shui Wushuang. If Nie Tian couldn't even beat Jian Chun, he wouldn't be able to fight Luo Zian and Jian Qiu. Just at the moment when the 3 sword shadows were about to hit, Nie Tian stomped his feet and his figure soared into the sky. He stabbed out with his sword, forcibly breaking through one of the sword shadows and swooping down on Jian Chun. Courting death. When Jian Chun saw Nie Tian advancing instead of retreating, he was instantly enraged. He let out a wild roar, and the green sea behind him suddenly became violent. A giant green snake rushed out, opened its huge mouth, and actually wanted to swallow Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned slightly. Sword intent gushed out from his whole body, and a sword formation appeared around him. It was the High God sword formation. Violent sword intent surged around Nie Tian, making him look like a giant sword that could pierce through heaven and earth. This sword formation again. Jian Chun's eyes sank slightly, but the anger in his eyes was even more intense. Last time, he was placed under the High God sword formation. This time, he would never repeat the same mistake. With this thought, Jian Chun's sword intent was released even more violently. Suddenly, countless green snakes gushed out of the green sea, turning into a huge wave and rushed towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian smiled slightly. He felt that the sword formation had accumulated enough power. His eyes trembled and he suddenly blasted out with his sword. In an instant, the sword intent in the High God sword formation suddenly gathered and a huge sword shadow of 3,000 meters was formed. It whistled out and pressed down violently. Boom! Chi-chi-chi. After a loud sound, there was an ear-piercing sound. Wherever the sword shadow went, it was invincible. The green snakes were all smashed. The green sea behind Jian Chun was hit by a huge force and shook violently. Chapter 1477. High up in the sky above the martial arts arena, Jian Chun was sent flying and smashed heavily into the arena. Hiss! The crowd gasped when they saw this scene. Their eyes trembled uncontrollably. Although most people had vaguely guessed that Nie Tian would win the battle, when Jian Chun displayed such powerful combat power, many people felt that the battle would be very tragic and that it was very likely that both sides would suffer. Unfortunately, the final result was a crushing victory for Nie Tian. Nie Tian's strength was really strange. This is impossible. In the next moment, an abrupt roar rang out from the gazebo high up in the sky. Jian Wuya's figure flickered, and he stepped out of the gazebo with a single step. He unleashed his killing intent, and his cold eyes locked onto Nie Tian. He couldn't understand. How could Jian Chun, a swordsman with a sword bone, lose to a swordsman with a sword mark? In his opinion, this was simply impossible. Jian Wuya knew that even if Jian Chun's current strength wasn't as good as Jian Qiu's, it wasn't too far off. Even he had been defeated so easily by Nie Tian. Didn't that mean that Jian Qiu was also likely to be no match for Nie Tian? At this moment, Jian Wuya finally realized how terrifying Nie Tian was. Jian Wuya looked at Nie Tian cold. His whole body was filled with killing intent, making him look ferocious. Nie Tian sensed the killing intent high up in the sky and looked up at Jian Wuya. However, he didn't take the latter seriously at all. If Jian Wuya wasn't a complete idiot, he would never have attacked Nie Tian. Palace Master Lai Yun was in front of him. If Jian Wuya still dared to attack openly, young Master Heartbroken would definitely punish him even more severely. At this moment, Nie Tian finally realized how important the role of holy judgment was. If there were no holy judgment, these palace masters would definitely not hesitate to attack their disciples or children once they saw them injured or beaten to death. If that happened, wouldn't everything be a mess? Jian Wuya, what are you trying to do? At this moment, the heartbroken prince's voice sounded cold. It sounded like thunder in Jian Wuya's ears. Jian Wuya's eyes trembled and his body shook slightly. His killing intent instantly dissipated. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. After which, he landed on the ground and looked at Jian Chun. Jian Chun struggled to get up. His entire body was drenched in blood. He seemed to be heavily injured, but in reality, his injuries were not fatal. Why? Why is your sword array so powerful? Jian Chun stared at Nie Tian with his blood-red eyes, a look of shock and confusion on his face. Jian Chun, you're not the only one whose strength has increased. It's as simple as that. Nie Tian said with a faint smile. High God Sword Formation. The stronger Nie Tian's strength was, the stronger the sword formation's might would be. Although he had not broken through to the late-stage low god realm, he was almost there. Naturally, the might of the high god sword formation would be even stronger. Most importantly, Nie Tian was not afraid of Jian Chun's poison. The most terrifying thing about Jian Chun was the poison in his sword intent. If he lost this advantage, his strength would be greatly reduced. After taking a glance at Jian Chun, Nie Tian turned around and left without hesitation. The first battle of the top 24 ended with Nie Tian's victory. This time, Nie Tian's heart softened and he did not kill Jian Chun. However, Jian Wuya did not feel grateful to Nie Tian because of this. Instead, he resented him even more. Jian Wuya, who was in the pavilion, stared coldly at Nie Tian. He wished he could tear the latter into pieces. Young Master Heartbroken couldn't help but shake his head when he saw this scene. It was true that he was a holy judge, but he could only restrict Jian Wuya and the others during the grand competition of the 12 Shrine. Once the competition ended, his status as a holy judge would lose its effect. At that time, if Jian Wuya wanted to kill Nie Tian, he would have no right to stop him. In fact, after every grand competition of the 12 Shrine, there would be fierce confrontations between the 12 shrines. Many talented disciples would fall because of this. It was precisely because of this that the conflicts between the 12 shrines grew bigger and bigger. Next, the competition continued. The battle of the top 24 was between the top 12 in terms of accumulated points and the bottom 12. This was to ensure that the stronger ones could enter the top 12. The next battle was out of Nie Tian's expectation. It was Duguanai and Thousand Flowing Kill. It's actually these two. This is interesting. Nie Tian looked at the two figures on the arena and couldn't help but smile. Duguanai and Thousand Flowing Kill were both from the Heaven Domain, but the difference was that one joined the Crimson Lunar Palace and the other joined the Arctic Palace. Thousand Flowing Kill had come to the Dominion earlier than Duguanai, but he was only a mid-stage low god. On the other hand, Duguanai had just arrived at the Dominion not long ago and his strength had already reached the mid-stage low god. In addition, he had the 100 virtual body and the eye of the Devil's Knight. Therefore, this battle was definitely a one-sided battle. Thousand Flowing Kills had no hope of winning at all. Brother Dugu, long time no see. Thousand Flowing Kill obviously recognized Duguanai. He smiled faintly and showed a friendly expression. Thousand Flowing Kill, I'm of the same generation as your father, Qianqinyu. You should call me uncle. Duguanai smiled sinisterly and taunted. Duguanai. A simple sentence immediately ignited Thousand Flowing Kill's anger, rendering him speechless. In fact, Duguanai was right. When he was in the heaven domain, he had indeed worked together with Qianqinyu. It wasn't wrong to say that he was Thousand Flowing Kill's elder. But at this moment, he said it in front of so many people. This was an insult to the Thousand Flow Killer. Thousand Flowing Kill, you came to the Dominion 100 years earlier than me, and yet you're only a mid-stage low god. Your talent is indeed extraordinary. Dugunai looked at Thousand Flowing Kill cold, and said in a deep voice, I just don't understand why Xue Lingtian would let a piece of trash enter the Dominion. Dugunai, you're courting death. Thousand Flowing Kill's shrewdness was on a completely different level from Dugunai's. He was thoroughly enraged. With a deep roar, he stomped on the ground and charged forward. Trash, living is a waste. Dugunai smiled coldly. His eyes were cold and full of contempt. He even dared to kill his own teacher. Why would he care about Thousand Flowing Kill? Die. The corner of Dugunai's mouth twitched a little, after which the void devil 100 forms made his move. A ball of black sword light whizzed out, directly enveloping the Thousand Flowing Killer. The void devil sword will released a terrifying devouring power, and the Thousand Flowing Killer didn't even have time to scream. Not even his bones remained. The crowd couldn't help but tremble when they saw this scene. They didn't expect Duguanai to be so ruthless. He was even so ruthless to a martial artist from the same plane of existence. In such a vast dominion, martial artists from the same plane of existence were usually very friendly. However, Duguanai only had a murderous nature. He didn't care about anything else. Thousand Flowing Kill. At this moment, an enraged roar sounded. Xue Wushuang appeared in the sky. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Duguanai. He grew up with Thousand Flowing Kill and came to the Dominion together. Although they weren't brothers, they were closer than brothers. Xue Wushuang regarded Thousand Flowing Kill as his younger brother. At this moment, seeing his younger brother being killed, how could he not be angry? Xue Wushuang. Duguanai suddenly raised his head and looked at Xue Wushuang. He spoke coldly. Then, he moved and grabbed Thousand Flowing Kill's godhead. A wave of devilish void chi gushed out from his palm. Ah! In the next moment, a miserable scream came from the godhead. Then, the godhead completely dimmed. Chapter 1478. Duguanai. High up in the sky, Xue Wushuang's eyes were bloodshot. He shouted Dugunai's name word by word. His anger was like a volcano that was about to erupt. He did not expect that Duguanai would be so ruthless that he would erase Flowing Kill's divine sense in front of him and completely destroy Flowing Kill. The crowd was also stunned. Dugunai's ruthlessness was shocking. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He knew Duguanai well and he knew how ruthless he was. However, he was a little curious as to why Duguanai would kill Flowing Kill in front of Xue Wushuang. In this way, there would be irreconcilable hatred between him and Xue Wushuang. Perhaps there was some grudge between Duguanai and the Snow Emperor and he wanted to take revenge on Xue Wushuang. Xue Wushuang, if you want to take revenge for the Thousand Flowing Kills, I'll accompany you anytime. Dugunai's lips curled into a mocking smile as he looked at Xue Wushuang and coldly said in an extremely arrogant manner, Dugunai, if I don't kill you, I am not Xue Wushuang. Xue Wushuang roared, but he did not dare to make any move. Of course, he knew that if he made any move now, he would be killed on the spot by the hidden guards of the 12 shrines. I will wait for you. Duguanai smiled mockingly. He moved and left the arena. Duguanai killed Flowing Kill in a domineering manner, which caused a great stir in the crowd. It took a long time for the crowd to calm down. After a while, the competition continued. The next few battles were carried out very quickly. Many martial artists would wisely choose to admit defeat when facing opponents who were far stronger than them. Soon, the top 24 battles were over and the top 12 were decided. The top 12 participants were all very strong martial artists. Entering the top 12 also meant that they would be able to gain points. This was very good news for martial artists and their shrines. The cloud-shattering Divine Palace had 2 disciples in the top 12, the Heaven Sword Divine Palace had 2, the Medicine King Divine Palace had 2, and the Crimson Moon Divine Palace had 2. The other Divine Palaces each had 1 or none. Among the top 12, there were 5 that Nie Tian paid more attention to: Luo Xian, Jian Qiu, Shui Wushuang, Duguanai, and Xian Wuhan. Among them, the strongest was undoubtedly Luo Xian. As for the remaining 4, it was hard to say who was stronger. Vaguely, Nie Tian felt that Xian Wuhan would be a rather terrifying enemy. He had some suspicions about this person's identity. He felt that other than being a member of the 7 Knights Divine Palace, she definitely had another identity. Soon, the first battle of the top 12 began, and 2 figures appeared on the arena. "It's Jian Qiu." Nie Tian stared at one of them and called out his name. It was Jian Qiu. Up until now, Nie Tian had seen Autumn Sword fight against everyone. However, his opponents had all been very weak. They had not been able to force him to reveal his true strength. At this moment, Jian Qiu's opponent was a female cultivator. She was very beautiful and petite. Just one look at her would make one feel tender affection for her. Nie Tian remembered that this girl was called Wang Ying. She was a member of the Qingyang Divine Palace. Her strength was already at the peak of the lower deity stage, and her battle record was pretty good. I hope Wang Ying can force Jian Qiu to reveal his true strength. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought to himself. On the arena, Jian Qiu's cold gaze swept across Wang Ying and he said directly, "You should admit defeat. I don't want to kill a woman." His voice was ice-cold and filled with overbearingness. It was obvious that Jian Qiu did not take Wang Ying seriously at all. "Jian Qiu, I know that you are very strong. However, I have also prepared for a long time for this tournament." Wang Ying's pretty face turned cold, and she said in a deep voice, "I would like to see how powerful the number 1 genius of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace is." As soon as she finished speaking, Wang Ying's gaze sank. A pair of rainbow-colored wings appeared on her back. When the wings spread out, they were actually 1,000 meters long. They vibrated in mid-air and illuminated the sky. When Nie Tian saw this scene, his gaze sank slightly. He could not help but raise the corner of his mouth and murmured, "I didn't expect this girl to be an extremely rare light attribute warrior. Perhaps she can really force Jian Qiu to reveal his true strength." "So beautiful!" The crowd could not help but exclaim when they saw the rainbow-colored wings shining in the sky. They looked at the beautiful light. Light attribute warriors were very rare, 1 in a million. Wang Ying's strength should not be underestimated. "Is this your strength?" Jian Qiu looked at the rainbow-colored wings behind Wang Ying and frowned. His eyes were filled with extreme disdain. Arrogant! Wang Ying was despised once again. She could not help but roar. Then, her figure trembled and her wings shook. Suddenly, countless rainbow-colored light blades appeared in the void, blotting out the sky and blasting towards Jian Qiu. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. There was an ear-piercing sound in the air. The rainbow-colored light blades that filled the sky fell and roared. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought to himself, light attribute warriors are indeed not simple. Wang Ying's strength is definitely above Jian Chun's. Although Wang Ying was not a swordsman, the rainbow-colored light blades were very sharp. Nie Tian guessed that her battle prowess was even higher than Jian Chun's. The rainbow-colored light blades were dazzling. Under the beautiful scene, there was a strong killing intent. The crowd could not help but feel the killing intent in the void. Obviously, they did not expect Wang Ying to be so strong even though she looked weak. The gazes of the palace lords on the pavilion trembled. They were obviously very surprised. However, Jian Wuya's face was calm. He was not worried for Jian Qiu at all. He was very clear about Jian Qiu's strength. He was absolutely not someone that Wang Ying could defeat. On the battle stage, Jian Qiu stood in the same place. His face was as gloomy as water. Bleak autumn wind, kill. Just as the countless rainbow-colored blades of light were about to smash into Jian Qiu, he suddenly muttered. A thin and long sword appeared in his hand and he slashed out with it. In the next instant, a snake-like sword shadow whizzed out with extreme sharpness. This was the first time Jian Qiu had used the sword spirit Bleak Autumn Wind. The slender sword shadow seemed to have no power, but it was very strange. It directly passed through the endless rainbow-colored light blades. Bang! In the next moment there was a muffled sound. Wang Ying's body trembled and she was directly sent flying. Suddenly, the rainbow-colored light blades that filled the sky disappeared instantly. This strange scene caused everyone present to be stunned, and they were all dumbfounded. Countless eyes focused on Jian Qiu. They had no idea what was going on. It was clearly Wang Ying who attacked first. Jian Qiu was only passively defending. Why was it Wang Ying who was injured? What a fast sword! Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly, and he gasped in his heart. At this moment, he finally understood why Jian Qiu was called the #1 genius of the Sky Sword Divine Palace. It was not because of anything else, but because of his fast sword. Wang Ying attacked first and Autumn Sword attacked later, but he was able to arrive first. This was very terrifying. In terms of speed, Jian Qiu's sword was the fastest among all the swordsmen that Nie Tian had seen. Wang Ying did not have a chance to react at all. She was directly hit and her chest was pierced. She struggled to stand up. Her face was as pale as paper. She said in astonishment, "How is this possible? Why is your sword so fast?" Jian Qiu smiled cold and said, "It is already very good that you are able to force me to use my sword." Wang Ying frowned and her aura dissipated. She said dejectedly, "I am not your opponent. I admit defeat." Chapter 1479. The battle between Jian Qiu and Wang Ying gave Nie Tian a whole new understanding of Jian Qiu's strength. Wang Ying was strong, but she could only force Jian Qiu to use his sword. In fact, it made sense. As the #1 genius of Sky Sword Divine Palace, how could he not have a powerful trump card? Most of the people who could enter the top 12 had deliberately suppressed their strength. Jian Qiu was no exception. His target was the #1 low god. Next, the competition continued. It was finally Nie Tian's turn. Nie Tian smiled faintly at Imorushi. Then, with a leap, he landed on the arena. Boom! At the same time his figure descended, an enormous figure descended as well. The entire martial arena actually shook with a loud bang, as if it was unable to endure the enormous pressure, and was on the verge of collapsing. In front of Nie Tian was a 3-meter-tall giant with bulging muscles. Standing on the arena, he looked like an iron tower. It's Sanjin Ursha of Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace. The appearance of the giant caused the surrounding crowd to exclaim. Countless eyes lit up. Obviously, they were looking forward to this battle. Nie Tian looked at the giant in front of him and his eyes narrowed. He could not help but smile bitterly and murmured, "Why is it this guy?" Sanjin Ursha was from Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace. Among the younger generation of Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace, he was second only to Luo Zian. This person was born with extraordinary strength. Both his defense and attack power were very strong. Most of the martial artists who fought with him before were knocked down by him with a single punch. This guy's martial body was strange. Although he only had the strength of a peak low god, his martial body was not inferior to a peak middle god. When the crowd in the pavilion saw that Nie Tian's opponent was Sanjin Ursha, they became interested and started discussing. Sanjin Ursha was born with extraordinary strength. Rumor has it that he is a descendant of the Titan clan. He possesses a powerful Titan bloodline. I reckon that Nye Tian will be in danger if he meets him, Yao Chen said gloomily and coldly. Palace Lord Medicine King is right. Among all the martial artists participating in the lower god competition, in terms of absolute strength, Sanjin Ursha is definitely number one. Although Nye Tian's strength is strange, he may not be able to injure Sanjin Ursha. Jian Wuya also sneered, a playful look in his eyes. As for the other palace lords, some of them agreed, while some of them objected. Young Master Heartbroken Heart remained calm and did not say anything. On the martial stage, when Sanjin Ursha saw that his opponent was Nye Tian, he immediately smiled and said, Nye Tian, I heard that you have a grudge with senior sister Xian. I, Sanjin Ursha, will kill you in senior sister Xian's place today. Nye Tian smiled and raised his eyebrows. Do you have the strength? Jin Ursha laughed and suddenly took a step forward. He actually left a clear footprint on the stage and said in a loud voice, How is my strength? Looking at the footprint, Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help but sink. He said in his heart, This guy's strength is really strong. The martial stage is reinforced by the divine formation and is very stable. Yet, this guy can actually leave a footprint. How terrifying! Brat die. Seeing that Nye Tian was silent, Sanjin Ursha suddenly laughed wildly. He actually dashed towards Nye Tian like a raging bull. The martial stage suddenly shook, and it actually looked like it was on the verge of collapsing. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. Then, he felt an extremely powerful impact coming towards him. He couldn't help but tighten his eyes. He took a step forward and his figure soared into the sky, avoiding Sanjin Ursha's frontal attack. This guy was like a wild beast. If he bumped into him, he would definitely be injured. Trying to escape? Sanjin Ursha's huge body stabilized. He raised his head and looked at Nye Tian. He grinned and said, You want to escape from me, Sanjin Ursha? Dream on. As his arrogant voice fell, Sanjin Ursha took a step forward. With a loud bang, his body suddenly leaped up and he threw a punch. Immediately, a shadow of a fist roared and rushed towards Nye Tian. The shadow of the fist pressed over like a mountain. Nye Tian immediately felt a huge pressure, and his body couldn't help but tremble. Sanjin Ursha's strength was indeed very strong. Even the current Nye Tian would definitely be at a disadvantage if he wanted to fight him head-on. Behind Nye Tian, meteor wings appeared. With a flap of the wings, he directly dodged Sanjin Ursha's attack. Since his punch missed, Sanjin Ursha was furious. He immediately punched even more fiercely. One punch after another, he didn't stop. One after another, the shadow of the fist was violently thrown out. Nye Tian was in midair. His figure was extremely agile, and he easily dodged Sanjin Ursha's attack. Sanjin Ursha's attack power was indeed fierce, but his weakness was also very obvious. That was, his speed wasn't fast enough. If it was a normal warrior, it would be very difficult to dodge such a concentrated attack. However, Nye Tian had meteor wings, and he could easily dodge all the attack. Boom, boom, boom. High up in the sky, there was a concentrated whistling sound. Huge shadow of the fist flew past Nye Tian, but they couldn't hurt him. The crowd was dazzled. They didn't expect Nye Tian's speed to be so fast. B*****. Sanjin Ursha stood in midair. His face gradually became red. It was obvious that he didn't have enough strength. He stared at Nye Tian with his bull eyes and said loudly, Nye Tian, if you're a man, fight me head-on. You're always dodging. What kind of skill is that? Nye Tian's figure stabilized. He smiled faintly and said, You don't have enough strength now. Can you still fight me head-on? Of course I can. Sanjin Ursha roared in anger and shouted, Even if I, Sanjin Ursha, only have one breath left, you are still not my opponent. Fine. Nye Tian nodded and said, Then as you wish, I will fight you head-on. When the crowd heard Nye Tian's words, they couldn't help but be stunned. They suspected that they had heard wrongly. With Nye Tion's agility, Sanjin Ursha couldn't hit him at all. As long as he continued to play and exhausted Sanjin Ursha's strength, Nye Tion would win for sure. But now, Nye Tion chose to fight Sanjin Ursha head-on. Wasn't he looking for death? High up in the sky, Nye Tion's lips curled up slightly. The aura around his body exploded and endless starlight gushed out from his body. It actually condensed into an armored giant that enveloped his body. Sanjin Ursha's strength is very strong. It's just the right time to test the power of the armor of Star Soul, Nye Tion smiled faintly and said in his heart. He chose to fight Sanjin Ursha head-on because he wanted to test the power of the armor of Star Soul. The power of the flame of Star Soul had already been tested on Xian Wuhan's body. Right now, it was just the right time to test the power of the armor of Star Soul. Stinking brat, you are looking for death. Don't blame me. Seeing that Nye Tion was really going to fight him head-on, Sanjin Ursha couldn't help but be overjoyed. All the strength in his body gushed out and his huge body couldn't help but become even more muscular. Boom! Sanjin Ursha gathered all the strength in his fist and punched out fiercely. He was definitely going to kill Ling Xian in one move. Nye Tion smiled faintly and also punched out. The armored giant outside his body moved and a ferocious punch came crashing down. Boom! At the instant when the two fists collided, a loud explosion rang out. Instantly, an endless amount of energy exploded outwards, causing the void to tremble. It was as though the heavens and earth were about to collapse. In an instant, Nye Tion felt a huge force rushing towards him, causing his body to tremble. But in the next moment, all the energy flowed into the armor of Star Soul and dissipated in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1480. Rumble. In midair, the gigantic body of the Sanjin Ursha was like a huge boulder as he smashed into the arena, causing the entire arena to tremble violently. When the crowd saw this scene, their eyes trembled violently as their expressions became incredulous. They completely didn't dare to believe the scene in front of them. Before Nye Tion and the Sanjin Ursha clashed head-on, everyone thought that Nye Tion was courting death by doing this. But the result of the clash between the two caused everyone to be dumbfounded. The Sanjin Ursha, who had such overwhelming strength, actually lost to Nye Tion. This was simply too inconceivable. Nye Tion's silhouette stood tall in the air as he looked at the Sanjin Ursha, who had sunk deep into the arena. The corners of his lips curled up slightly as he thought in his heart, the might of the astral soul armor is indeed very strong. Just now at the instant of collision, Nye Tion felt a huge force assaulting him, but it was completely dissipated by the astral soul armor. It was extremely strange. If not for the astral soul armor, Nye Tion would definitely be heavily injured at this moment. One had to say that the strength of the Sanjin Ursha was indeed powerful. Even under the situation where he was exhausted, he was still so terrifying. Bang! At this moment, an explosion sounded on the arena. The Sanjin Ursha's gigantic body leaped up. His entire body was already dripping with blood, but the aura around him was still extremely violent. He glared angrily at Nye Tion, his face filled with shock as he roared in a deep voice, "Stinking brat, what method did you use?" The Sanjin Ursha had always been proud of his strength, but he didn't expect that today he would actually be defeated in the hands of Nye Tion. "You're not convinced?" Nye Tion's silhouette flashed as he directly landed on the arena. A wild and unrestrained aura was released, forcing the Sanjin Ursha to retreat repeatedly. The Sanjin Ursha's strength was already exhausted, and now that he was heavily injured by Nye Tion, he was already extremely weak. "Brat, consider yourself ruthless." The Sanjin Ursha glared angrily at Nye Tion. He knew that he had already lost this battle and could only turn around to concede. Seeing the 3 gold sands leave, Nye Tion let out a deep breath. This battle was more difficult than he had imagined. Outside the battlefield, a few pairs of cold eyes stared at Nye Tion. Clearly, they did not expect him to have such a terrifying trump card. Nye Tian, it seems that I have underestimated you. Luo Xian's beautiful eyes flickered and the corners of her mouth rose. She said in her heart, but even if he defeats Sanjin Ursha, he is definitely not my opponent. I am determined to become the lesser god chief. Anyone who tries to stop me will die. As the word die fell, Luo Xian's beautiful face revealed a sinister expression. After this battle, her hostility towards Nye Tian increased by a notch. After defeating 3 Jin Ursha, Nye Tian successfully advanced to the top 6. In the next 2 battles, the difference in strength was more obvious. Luo Xian and Xian Wuhan easily won and advanced to the top 6. The 5th battle was between 2 martial artists of similar strength. It was very tragic. In the end, Yao Yen from the Medicine King Palace won. In the last battle of the top 12, the remaining 2 people were more interesting. They were Xue Wu Shuang and Duguanai. At this time, Xue Wu Shuang and Duguanai were already standing on the arena. I did not expect these 2 to meet each other. I am afraid this battle will not end until one of them dies. Nye Tian looked at the 2 figures on the arena and smiled in his heart. Duguanai had just killed Qian Lu Sha and then he met Xue Wu Shuang. It was really a small world for enemies. Duguanai. Xue Wu Shuang stared at Duguanai coldly. His eyes were almost spitting fire. The person in front of him had killed the person closest to him apart from his father. How could he not hate him? Xue Wu Shuang, I did not expect to meet you so soon. Duguanai looked at Xue Wu Shuang mockingly and said with a cold smile, I would like to see how strong Xuelingtian's son is. Du Gai's cold and murderous gaze swept across Xue Wu Shuang. His eyes were full of contempt. He did not take Xue Wu Shuang seriously at all. Duguanai, you are too arrogant. Xue Wu Shuang sensed the disdain in Duguanai's eyes and immediately let out a furious roar. Her entire body released a huge amount of ice chi. Suddenly, countless ice blades appeared, forming a layer of frost on the entire stage. The frost roared in the wind and turned into countless ice blades that pressed down on Duguanai. In the face of Xue Wu Shuang's attack, Duguanai did not frown. There was not fear in his eyes but disdain. He said coldly, You want to kill me with this kind of attack? Childish. As his deep voice fell, Duguanai raised his palm, and a dark and chaotic void chi gushed out, spreading in the air like waves of air. The ice blades in the air melted under the impact of the 100 void chi. Xue Wu Shuang's body was surrounded by the 100 void chi. He immediately felt that the yuan meridians in his body were being strongly suppressed. He could not use his strength. Nye Tian frowned and thought to himself, this is not good. Xue Wu Shuang had been too careless. He had fallen into the 100 void barrier. This way, his strength would be greatly suppressed and he would be in a very passive position. In fact, Xue Wu Shuang could not be blamed. Duguanai's 100 void body was indeed overbearing. Even Nye Tian's dragon vein was suppressed. Xue Wu Shuang could not resist it. The crowd's eyes trembled when they saw what was happening on the stage. This was the first time that Duguanai had released such a powerful 100 void chi in front of the crowd. Even though they were thousands of meters away, the crowd could still feel a strong sense of oppression. Damn it! Xue Wu Shuang felt that his strength was being suppressed. He cursed and threw out a palm. A huge icicle was formed and flew towards Duguanai. Xue Wu Shuang, you are too weak. Duguanai sneered and attacked with the 100 void transformation. A shadow of a sword shot out and shattered the icicle. He then attacked Xue Wu Shuang. Xue Wu Shuang's eyes trembled. He did not expect Duguanai to be so strong. In a hurry, an ice shield appeared in front of him. Boom! However, how could the ice shield withstand Duguanai's attack? When the shadow of the sword swept past, the ice shield shattered. Bang! The next moment, Xue Wu Shuang's body was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. The horrifying scene shocked the crowd. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. Xue Wu Shuang was at the peak of the lower celestial stage. However, he was defeated by Duguanai, a middle-stage lower celestial stage martial artist. It was so strange. Nie Tian's face darkened. He was shocked. He had fought against Xue Wu Shuang before and he knew how powerful Xue Wu Shuang was. It was beyond his expectation that Xue Wu Shuang would be sent flying by Duguanai. Duguanai, it seems that your 100 void body and the eyes of Devil's Night have become more terrifying after reaching the divine state. Nie Tian fixed his eyes on Duguanai and thought to himself. He had thought that the battle between Duguanai and Xue Wu Shuang would be evenly matched. He did not expect that Xue Wu Shuang would be defeated so easily. It turns out that Xuelingtian's son is a good-for-nothing. On the martial arena, Duguanai shouted out loudly. His figure flashed, and he actually charged towards Xue Wu Shuang. The 100 devil void transformations in his hand fiercely pierced downwards with the intention of finishing off Xue Wu Shuang. Chapter 1481. Just as Duguanai was about to kill Xue Wu Shuang, a golden ray suddenly shot out, causing his eyes to freeze and his expression to change slightly. Duguanai sensed the killing intent in the golden radiance and was forced to dodge it. However, he was still affected by the aftershock and a deep wound appeared on his arm. Do you still have a trump card? Duguanai smiled coldly, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Xue Wu Shuang stood up. Although his body was covered in blood, his arm was flickering with a dazzling golden light. A sage's arm! Nie Tian was stunned and almost shouted. He had almost forgotten that Xue Wu Shuang was born with a sage's arm. Xue Wu Shuang's sage's arm was innate and not fused with it. Therefore, it was more terrifying than the Snow Empress's god's right hand. Duguanai, prepare to die. Xue Wu Shuang's eyes were red. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, Your 100 void physique can suppress my godhead, but you can't suppress my sage's arm. Sage's arm? Duguanai was slightly startled. He glanced at Xue Wu Shuang's arm and revealed a greedy expression as he mocked. Your Xue clan's people are all trash, yet you want to be saints. What a joke. Bastard! Don't insult my father. Xue Wu Shuang roared furiously. He raised his sage's arm and charged at Duguanai. Xue Wu Shuang was different from Duguanai. He had his own bottom line. How could he tolerate someone insulting his late father? Boom! A golden fist shadow appeared in the void. It was overbearing and filled with a strong murderous intent. The sage's arm was very powerful. Even the void shook when it was punched. Duguanai frowned slightly and attacked with his sword. He wanted to block Xue Wu Shuang's fist. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the power of the sage's arm. Boom! Duguanai's powerful sword was shattered by Xue Wu Shuang's fist. The huge fist shadow pressed down on Duguanai like a mountain, directly blasting him into the ground of the arena. Duguanai, you killed my brother, I want you dead. Xue Wu Shuang was extremely ferocious. Her figure flashed as she leaped into the sky. An even more ferocious punch smashed down on the arena. Boom! The huge fist shadow directly bombarded Duguanai's body, and a deep pit actually appeared on the stage. Duguanai's body sank into the arena. Blood slowly flowed out, and his entire body was deformed. Wow! The crowd couldn't help but take a deep breath when they saw the tragic scene on the stage. The battle between Duguanai and Xue Wu Shuang was too strange. Initially, Duguanai already had an overwhelming advantage. However, in an instant, the tables had turned and Xue Wu Shuang had become the one being crushed. Is that guy dead? The crowd couldn't help but be confused when they saw that there was no movement on the stage for a long time. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he used his divine sense to check. He said in his heart, Duguanai hasn't used his Devil's Night's Eye yet. If he died just like that, it would be too unexpected. Duguanai's strength was strange. Although the 100 emptiness body was domineering, it was basically useless against a power that was not afraid of the 100 emptiness body. For example, shares 3 lives. Meridian and Nietion's star raw stone were not afraid of the 100 emptiness body. Xue Wushuang's sage's arm was not weakened by the 100 emptiness body, which made Dugunai lose a huge advantage. Nietion's divine sense spread out and felt a weak aura. His face couldn't help but change. Dugunai was still alive. At this moment, Nietion felt that Duguni's Devil's Knight's eye released a strong force. It was a strong life force, and it was healing Duguni's body. Xue Wushuang's punch was indeed domineering, and it almost destroyed Duguni's body. Dugunai, you're just SOSO. Xue Wushuang looked down at Dugunai, and he felt the latter's weak aura. He smiled coldly, and it was very arrogant. Really? However, before he finished his arrogant laughter, Duguni's voice was heard, and then the body that seemed to be distorted stood up. The next moment a strange scene happened. Under the gaze of countless people, Duguni's body instantly recovered, and he was unharmed. How is this possible? Xue Wushuang's eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't believe his eyes. What kind of power did Dugunai have in his body? How could it be so strange that he could recover from such a serious injury in an instant? Nietion frowned and murmured, Devil's Knight's eye. Yes, the reason why Dugunai could recover in an instant was because of Devil's Knight's eye. Devil's Knight's eye was indeed the 8th extra pupil, and it contained a very strange power. At this moment, even the Holy Judgment and the others in the pavilion were slightly stunned. Obviously, they didn't expect Dugunai to be so stubborn. This was a bloody battle. Xue Wushuang, you've pissed me off. Dugunai stomped his feet and jumped up, facing Xue Wushuang in the air. His eyes had turned into a strange black color, like 2 bottomless abysses. Dugunai, you! Xue Wushuang was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Xue Wushuang, the saint's arm is indeed a good thing. Dugunai smiled coldly and said, It's such a waste to keep such a good thing with you. Xue Wushuang's eyes trembled violently. She felt a suffocating chill, but she immediately regained her calmness. She took a step forward and roared, Dugunai, you're courting death. As she roared, Xue Wushuang threw a punch. A huge fist shadow rolled out like a raging wave, crashing toward Dugunai. Xue Wushuang, you've underestimated me by using the same trick on me twice. Dugunai sneered. His eyes flickered strangely, and suddenly, 2 black vortexes appeared and expanded in an instant. They turned into 2 black claws and fiercely pounced toward Xue Wushuang. Boom! There was a loud bang in the void as the golden fist shadow and the black claws collided. 2 terrifying forces immediately exploded, and endless airwaves raged in the air. The eye of the Devil's Knight released a strange claw that was extremely terrifying. It forcefully blocked Xue Wushuang's punch. Kaboom! The next moment, the 2 forces were instantly annihilated. At the same time, another black claw came down from the void. Ah! Xue Wushuang's pupils shrank violently. He immediately felt that something was wrong and screamed. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. Swish! The black claw fell down, but it did not kill Xue Wushuang. Instead, it tore off his saint's arm. A bloody scene suddenly appeared in the void. Ah! My arm! Xue Wushuang screamed in pain as his arm was torn off. Xue Wushuang, I'll take the saint's arm. At that moment, Duguni's voice was heard, sounding extremely gloomy in the void. Boom! When Dugunai received the saint's arm, his eyes slightly trembled. A black vortex appeared in front of him, and a strange space-time aura was released.